Good afternoon and welcome to the Ku-ring-gai Local Planning Panel meeting of 17 August 2020. On behalf of the panel, I recognise the traditional custodians of the land, the Ku-ring-gai people on whom land we meet. I ask that
Christine Chong,
for the purpose of
join the meeting,
that you all put yourself on mute and remain on mute and put your phones on silent, and we'll ask that you unmute yourself when called to speak. Today, the order of business, in line with social distancing requirements and to limit the spread of COVID-19, Ku-ring-gai Local Planning Panel meetings can be used by Zoom and conference technology, and today that's what we're doing, and we're using Zoom. Any persons speaking at the local planning panel today, and we have a number, their voice and personal information, please note your name and address will be recorded as part of the meeting and made publicly available on Council's website via live stream and on-demand access, except any part of the meeting that is held in closed session. Accordingly, you must ensure that your address to the panel is respectful and that you use appropriate language and refrain from making any defamatory statements or discriminatory comments. Ku-ring-gai Council does not accept any liability for statements, comments or actions taken by individuals during a meeting of Ku-ring-gai Local Planning Panel. People connecting to this meeting by conferencing technology are reminded that under the Local Government Act 1993, the recording of meetings by a member of the public using any electronic recording device, including a mobile phone or video camera, is not permitted. Any person found recording without the permission of council may be expelled from the meeting. Of course, that will be challenging, but we will be able to disconnect you from the Zoom meeting. Some points to note: on-demand viewing of each Ku-ring-gai Local Planning Panel meeting will be available until the holding of the subsequent meeting, and recordings of this meeting are copyright protected and cannot be reused or reproduced without
join the meeting.
Council. Today we have one item on the agenda, that is the 102-104 Bannockburn Road, 2 Reilly Street, Pymble, and 83 Bobbin Head Road, Turramurra. And we have no apologies other than the chair, who was assigned to this panel today, Angus Talbot, due to personal circumstances, was unable to attend today's panel meeting, and myself, Jacqueline Townsend, I'm here as your chair today. There is no other panel apologies. Are there any staff apologies? No. My name's Jacqueline Townsend. As I said, I'm the chair. The expert panel members today is Michael Levy and James Coleman, and our community panel member is Elaine Malecki. We have panel declarations provided, and I call on any panel member to declare any interests they may have in today. If you could unmute and confirm your position regarding conflicts, please, Michael Levy.
No conflicts, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Jim Coleman. And Elaine Malecki?
I have no conflict.
Okay, and Jim, could you just unmute yourself and confirm whether you have any? You're still on mute.
Top right-hand corner, Jim.
Yes, that's it. Jim?
Yep.
Do you have any conflicts to declare?
No, I do not have any conflict, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Any staff declarations of conflict? No, none. Regarding this DA, as most here today would know, that there is a lot of community interest in this development, and that has been demonstrated by the over 100 written submissions that have been received through the assessment process. And also we have 28 speakers today on this item. The panel does have the discretion to limit those speakers but given the interest and the significant development that is before us, and the fact that we only have one item on the agenda, it has been agreed by the panel to allow all speakers registered to have their 3 minutes to speak to this item today. However, saying that, the number of speakers do not dictate an outcome. What they do is help and guide the panel to make a determination based on the controls and standards in place at the time the development is lodged. So what I would ask is that if you hear of one speaker before you speak on a topic that you are going to speak on and there is no new item or issue to address, we ask that you refrain from speaking. It's going to be a very long meeting, which we're all here to take on today, and we have no qualms about the length of it. But what would be helpful for the panel is that we don't hear the same submission on the same issue being made 2 or 3 or 4 times. So if you feel that someone before you has raised a point that you were going to raise, we ask that you refrain from speaking. What I'll also do is we'll call on the speaker in the order of registration, and I also note that there are a number of speakers who have identified and registered to speak for themselves, but also to speak for another person. You will have 3 minutes for each submission, and once you have finished, if you're speaking for yourself first, then clearly identify who you're speaking for next, and your time will start again. There is, again, I just confirmed 3 minutes, and we will keep to that very strictly today. And we will be speaking or hearing from speakers in the following order. We'll hear from the objectors first, then we'll hear from legal representatives, and then we'll hear from the applicant. The callers will be called from the speakers list, and the coordinator, who is Kerry Freya, will coordinate the timer. After each time you make a submission, you may be asked a question by one of the panel members. So please, once you've made your submission at the end of the 3 minutes, we will ask that you remain on the line until such time as the panel members indicate that they would like to ask you a question or not. Again, we've got 28 speakers, so we will try and get through this as quickly as we can, and hope that everyone can add by giving their assistance to being prepared for questions if so asked. So we'll get on with it. Kerry? So the first speaker today we have is Georgia Judge, and we understand that Georgia is speaking on behalf of Olivia Woodley. Georgia, if you're on the line, could you unmute and start speaking, because we can't locate you.
Oh, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank
Hello?
you. Yep.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, can I start?
Yes. Time starts now.
All right. Thank you. Hello, so I'm a Georgia Judge speaking on behalf of Olivia Woodley and her family, who reside at 88 Bannockburn Road. And these are her words.
Okay.
So we have been living at 88 Bannockburn Road for over 7 years now, and have 2 young children aged 3 and 5. We frequently travel to and from our local area, whether it be by foot or by car, to the parks, cafes, libraries, daycare and preschool, etc. I am a teacher at Pymble Public School, and I walk to the school via the north end of Bannockburn Road, including the dogleg section of Bannockburn Road onto Crown Street. There is no footpath on the dogleg section of Bannockburn Road, but like most pedestrians, I walk this route. It's the fastest way for me to get to the school, and this brings me to my point. The development, construction and driveway access to the development is in a busy and dangerous position. I would like to propose some conditions to be considered should this development go through. 1, that a roundabout is put in at the top of Bannockburn Road where it meets Reilly Street as a way of slowing down traffic and as a way of giving clearer directions to drivers who use these streets. 2, footpaths with ramp access are built on both sides of Bannockburn Road around the dogleg section where Bannockburn Road meets Crown Street. 3, that you consider installing no parking signs on this dogleg section of Bannockburn Road to allow for better visibility to pedestrians using this area. 4, the 40 km/h school zone speed limit continues from where Reilly Street meets Bannockburn Road down to Russell Street intersection. My house is at 88 Bannockburn Road, where it currently ends. 5, the location of the driveway access to the development at 2 Reilly Street meets council regulations and Australian standards. Lastly, I'm very concerned for the safety of my family, the school community, and people who walk and drive down Bannockburn Road. We have already seen quite a few mishaps and disgruntled drivers, and the street is regularly congested, especially during the school drop-off and pick-up times. I think that will probably wrap up my points, so.
We're just about out of time. So is that it?
It is. Sorry, my granddaughter. Yes, leave it as that.
That's gorgeous. Thank you. Panel, was there any questions for Georgia? None? No? Thank you. Thank you, Georgia. Thank you very much for taking the time today to speak to us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye. The next speaker is Mr. Kapoor, speaking on behalf of himself. If you could, can you hear me?
Hi, this is Rajeev. Can you hear me?
Yes, you can. Yes.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Rajeev Kapoor. I'm a resident of 67 Bannockburn Road. I'm 50 meters away from the proposed development. And the point I want to make is that the footpath opposite my house is really slippery. And when it rains, you know, it's very difficult for people with the prams to walk in there. And I know that the council did a pedestrian count of about showing 100 pedestrians, and somebody did that and showed that that whole area is extremely sort of, it's not as busy as it was shown, but we have done a count, and that whole dog leg, I think the lady covered it before me. The footpath is not safe. The dog leg is not the best place. And my neighbor's daughter had an accident in front of my house where 2 cars were written off. So my point is, like, this has been identified as a dangerous and requires proper walking tracks. So that's all I'd like to cover, because the lady has covered some of the points I was trying to make earlier.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for taking note of the comments before you. Panel members, are there any questions for Mr. Kapoor?
Yes, I have one.
Mr. Coleman, this is Jim Coleman.
Yes, good afternoon. I was pleased to hear your point, and I'd just like to, just clarification. You're describing some existing conditions which are a matter of some worry, particularly to pedestrians. Am I right in saying that those conditions are somewhat separate from conditions which might follow the development that we're looking at today?
No, they're not separate, because the pedestrian conditions are sort of, they will impact the development, because I think, like the lady was saying, we don't have a zebra crossing, and some of the footpath is sort of really not where it needs to be, and you're not able to cross the road from one side of Bannockburn Road, which is towards Reilly Street, to the other side, which is where the school is.
Thank you. And would this mean that these conditions you're describing should really be attended to by the council, regardless of what happens today?
Look, I think they should be attended to, I agree, but I think the development will more make it, make that intersection extremely busy and more dangerous for the pedestrians, because it'll increase the traffic, and some of the older people living there will find it even more difficult to do what's happening today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any other, Elaine, were you looking at a question?
No.
And Michael's a no.
No.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. The next speaker is Mr. Gapes, and he's speaking on behalf of himself, and then following speaking on behalf of a Miss Mcdermott. Mr. Gapes, are you there? David Gapes or Tony Gapes? Tony, sorry. Tony?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Can you speak? Can you hear me correctly?
Yes, we can. We can hear you. Thank you. When you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and panel. My first presentation is on behalf of myself and my family. I live at 114 Bannockburn Road, Timber, with my wife. Whilst I've lived at this address for 29 years, I've spent the last 45 years working in Sydney's western and southwestern suburbs. I run a business that employs both heavy vehicle drivers and tradespeople, so I believe I'm well qualified to speak on the following two issues. The first relates to the practicalities of Condition 9 of the KLPP recommendation, which states that, and I quote, no construction-related vehicle shall access the site via Levy Street or Bannockburn Road up to and during the construction period. All access is to be via Bobbinhead Road. That just simply isn't practical in my experience. To start with, the very narrow width of the road edge on Bobbinhead Road doesn't allow for heavy vehicles to queue prior to starting work. Truckies like to get to a job in the early hours and park prior to the site opening, travelling where the traffic is least. Where, therefore, is this queuing going to happen? Because it certainly can't happen on Bobbinhead Road. Secondly, as I interpret the construction plans, there is insufficient turning area for heavy, rigid, articulated or truck and dog trailer vehicle configurations to safely turn around the exit at the site, again, via Bobbinhead Road. Even if there was, truckies don't like doing U-turns for safety reasons and also because it badly scrubs out their tyres. The single entry exit solution just simply isn't going to work. So when the truckies and tradies start to enter the site and exit the site via Levy and Bannockburn, who is going to monitor this? In other words, driving straight through the site. Will there be a locked gate at the Bannockburn Road entrance, for example? And secondly, what penalties will apply for both the vehicle driver and the developer if this event happens? My second concern relates to the council stipulation that all construction-related vehicles will use the basement car park for the period of the job. Again, this just simply isn't practical. Firstly, for the first 4 months of the project, there isn't going to be a basement car park. So during this time, where will they park? Even when the basement park is completed, car park is completed, I can tell you now the boys won't be using it. They prefer to park their vehicles closest to the job that they are working on that day for very good practical reasons. So it's highly likely that they'll be parking either somewhere else on the site or more likely on Bannockburn Road, Levy Street or Bobbinhead Road, none of which is suited to high density parking. So again, who will be policing this and what will the fines be for both the vehicle driver and the developer when this happens? To improve the chances of this not happening, has Council proposed to place no construction vehicle parking signs within 150 metres of the site on all three roads. I'm sorry, but I'm sure that whilst the Bobbinhead Road entry and exit edict was well intended, it just isn't practical, and my instinct is that it'll be ignored by both heavy vehicle drivers and tradies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You're now going, that's your time up for yourself. We'll now restart your time. Are you still speaking on behalf of Ms. Mcdermott?
I am, Madam Chair, yes.
You are. All right. Well, what we'll do is we'll ask questions of you when you finish speaking for both. So if your time with your submission for Ms. Mcdermott starts now.
I'm speaking on behalf of Tony Mcdermott, one of the other people objecting to the development. Noting the time limitations to each individual's presentation and the limitation on the number of people who can present in 3 minutes, this summarises the key points in Tony's view of the 54 individual objectors. First of all, the driveway onto the intersection is simply the least worst option. Council has accepted it as a compromise, despite asserting it's not compliant. It remains non-compliant. and should, on its own, be the basis of rejecting the DA in its entirety. Secondly, the Construction Traffic Management Plan, despite its many amendments, remains a recipe for more than 60 weeks of serious traffic disruption and danger at the western end. Thirdly, Bobbin Head Road, entries to the site, the swept path analysis has been swept under the carpet. The undertakings on access and parking on the east side are implausible and unsustainable and unenforceable. The impact on the safety of school children crossing the intersection, the experience of parents and carers parking in the precinct after construction remains unaddressed. The provision of only one parking spot per unit and the use of the basement car park for service and delivery vehicles, garbage trucks, etc., poses an ongoing inconvenience and a danger, both to neighbours and to the school community, as larger vehicles queue to enter and exit the complex. Council's approval completely ignores the impact of parking on Reedy Street after completion, especially at school drop-off and pick-up times. Many of the overshadowing, privacy and structural damage threats to the immediate neighbours remain unaddressed, including, for instance, the work needed on the sewer main to create a basement. Council's recommendation is inexplicably contradictory to several of the positions it pursued successfully in the Land and Environment Court decision in 2018, including on the development being in the public interest and on the frontage to Bobbin Head Road. The application supporting the documentation is notable for inaccuracies and misleading impressions. The now discredited and abandoned disability access report in relation to the Princess Street shops being the best example. Council's own document management was little better. Council's approval of this DA is built on compromise and concessions which serve to illustrate the unacceptably gross scale and inappropriate location of the development. The approval of this DA will make a farce of the intent of the SEP 55 planning and the Council's handling of it a mockery of the notion of community consultation. I therefore urge the panel to look at the integrity and credibility of the process, reject the application, or at least send the DA back to Council for review. Thank you, Madam Chair. That concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Panel members, do you have any questions for Mr. Gapes?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Coleman, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Gapes, in your submission in chief, and I quote, you talk about a substantial increase in vehicular traffic emanating from the site after construction. Now, the site has two frontages, and each of those frontages is a different kind of road with different traffic levels and so on. So can you just enlighten me a little bit as to what you mean by substantial?
John Papangelis.
Join the meeting.
Hello?
Sorry,
We're
Mr.
talking
Gapes.
about. Sorry.
John, when you're ready, it's about the both end, the Bobbin Head and the other side, the Benbox Road, and the word substantial increase in traffic, I think, is what Mr. Coleman's asking.
Yes,
for
that's correct.
explanation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to clarify that, the original sites had 4 houses, and we're now talking 18 properties. Presumably each property has 2 people living there at least, possibly more, seeing some 3-bedroom. There's a high chance that the number of vehicles coming out of the site on a regular basis is well and truly in excess of the 4 original properties, and that's the reason for the word substantial.
Thank you.
It comes down to simple mathematics.
Thank you.
Panel members, any others?
I have one, Madam Chair.
Ms. Malek?
Mr. Gapes, when he was speaking on 63 Bannockburn, spoke about inaccuracies in the report. I didn't pick up which section he was talking about, but he did reference the Princess Street shops. Could I have a little more detail from him, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Look, I'm relying in that comment on some research done by others in our group. I have to be honest, I haven't researched that individual point itself. I could certainly get back to you after the meeting with some more clarity on that if that's appropriate.
Thank you. That would be a matter for the chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We might, if there's anything further we need clarification around that, if it doesn't come out, we may come back to you. We've got your email address here and your telephone number. So thank you. Thank you for your time today, Mr. Gapis, as well.
That's a pleasure. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Now, I've got Jasmine speaking on behalf of Joe and John Horan. Is Jasmine on the line?
Jasmine Harvey.
Jasmine Harvey. Jasmine, you there?
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Sorry, just unmuted.
That's fine. I'm sure we'll have a bit of that today. We can never find it when we need it.
Yeah.
When you're ready.
Okay. So I'm speaking for John and Joe Horan, and this is their presentation. Our home on Orange Street is 50 metres from 83 Bobbin Head Road, which under the DA as amended will be the truck access for this large development for at least 2 years. We have experience of the impact of construction sites over the last 12 months at 80 and 79 Bobbin Head Road. The DA states that heavy vehicles will use Bobbin Head Road and the Pacific Highway. At any time of day, it will be challenging for long vehicles to enter or exit the site at 83 Bobbin Head Road. We have experienced inconvenience because of the increased traffic of heavy vehicles and have observed traffic events which are of concern. For example, there has been the need on Bobbin Head Road to cross the centre lines. The heavy vehicle is stopped and waiting for access. Unloading in the road or turning into a site. These events have occurred where the traffic managers have been present or not. The lane for cyclists is often blocked by about 15 workers' cars, which are parked all day. Cyclists thus ride in the traffic lane to avoid the long line of workers' cars. This also means that vehicles, large and small, cross the centre line. The large vehicles we have seen doing so include buses and concrete trucks. They are driving at oncoming downhill traffic. We have photographed incidents of large vehicles using Warrangie Street as a turning bay, interfering with traffic. We have seen concrete trucks waiting outside our home, barely a metre out from the curb, with the front of the vehicle at the line of the footpath. Drivers entering or leaving Warrangie Street feel uncertainty and risk. The transport events associated with a DA of this size will potentially cause accidents. Sorry. We have observed that despite having traffic management plans in place, workers do not appear to control entry and exit to sites or unloading on the street. Traffic managers are often absent, and we see evidence of limited compliance, rushed activities, and risky driving. Unloading at the roadside of long vehicles by forklift might be efficient, but is objectionable on Bobbin Head Road. The DA has changed to flow most of the heavy vehicles along Bobbin Head Road through the school zones for Northside Montessori and Sacred Heart Primary. Thimble Public School is nearby. Many students utilise the footpaths and cross the road. Risk and safety for students become particularly relevant in light of the changed heavy vehicle route. Around the intersection of 83 Warrangie Street and Bobbin Head Road, there are 10 households with young children and elderly people who use the footpaths of Bobbin Head Road throughout the day. Each home has at least one vehicle and uses the driveway several times daily. We want protection for every resident. The traffic management plan has to be staffed, monitored by KMC officers and police. We have witnessed unacceptable practices when zero control is visible other than driver decision making. Citizens object to increased exposure to hazards and risks of accidents. For all of the above, we object to the DA replacing 4 residences with 18 units, and thus concludes their presentation.
Right, thank you. I suppose you wouldn't be able to answer any questions if we asked you anything.
Not specifically. I can try, but no. I mean, I couldn't speak for them on a specific question. I don't think.
Panel members, we got anything for? No. Thank you very much for speaking on behalf of the Horans.
My pleasure. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. The next speaker we have is Mr. Whittington, who's speaking on behalf of himself. Are you there, Mr. Whittington?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can very clearly. Thank you. Your time starts now.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This development is as inappropriate, non-compliant, dubious and dangerous as it has been from the outset in 2017. I urge the panel to reject it, as the Land and Environment Court did in 2018. I've lived opposite Pymble Public School for 23 years. It's out my back gate. 3 of my 8 children went there. 2 of my grandchildren are there now. My front gate faces the intersection which this development fronts, directly across from our house. I see the chaos on that intersection as cars try to leave and enter it, drivers confused by its configuration, screeching to a halt, realising they've taken the wrong exit, not stopping at all because they don't understand the give way signs or who has right of way. I see children, parents, carers, other family members on their way to and from school, on foot, weaving their way through moving traffic and parked cars. Half of this activity, especially the kids crossing the road, occurs where, inexplicably, there is no school speed zone, no made footpaths, and no pedestrian crossing. Carelessness with detail and lack of rigour by council in challenging it has been the hallmark of this DA. From the original 2017 traffic report, which claimed there'd be no increase in vehicle movements in the morning peak hour, through to the disputable assertions about the compliance of the driveway location, inaccuracies in the access report about the proximity of shops and services, and vagueness, omissions and errors in the construction traffic management plan. All of that now tolerated and accepted by council staff, and all from an applicant who outlaid more than $12 million to buy the site before having the slightest indication that their proposal would be approved. There have been more than 50 individual objectors from more than 40 homes immediately adjacent to or within a block of the development's eastern and western frontages. Nearly 30 people made registered to address the panel today. These numbers are unusually high for a development of this size and nature. Why? Because it is in such an inappropriate location in every sense and at every stage, during construction and especially after completion, including for its prospective occupants. There is little about the DA that ticks the boxes straight up on all the good outcomes envisaged by the SEP 55 legislation. Rather, it relies for its approval on concessions, variations, disputed interpretations and negotiated compromises, most now endorsed simply by the opinion of staff at a council which previously opposed what it now supports. I trust the panel will not lend itself to such a questionable proposition. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Whittington, I'd just like to point out that the comments about the staff are not welcomed, and what we have here is an assessment process conducted by the appropriate staff and level of staff here at the council. So the panel take no issue with the assessment process, and be assured that your submissions in that regard have been heavily considered and dealt with quite arduously before we got here today. So they've been heard loud and clear, but the process itself of this development and the assessment to date has not raised any concerns for us. And I'd just like to put that out there now. And whilst you're more than welcome to consider and make submissions on compliance and matters of public interest, which you've done very clearly and succinctly, which we thank you for doing so, we're not going to take on board those other comments. Panel members, do you have any questions of Mr. Whittington?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Levy. Mr. Whittington, Mr. Levy, one of our experts, to ask you a question.
Thank you.
Mr. Whittington, I'm just wondering, in your experience in living locally and your description of some of the traffic issues that are experienced, the extent to which they may be caused by visitors or sort of people who are not local to the area, compared to those residents who live nearby, I guess, understand the road and its conditions and the number of pedestrians, particularly school children getting around. I mean, is it your observation that these sorts of things are caused by all drivers in the area, or is it, do you think perhaps people coming and visiting from a distance?
It would only be an assumption, but you'd be correct in thinking that people who are not familiar with the area are those who have the most difficulty with it, obviously. The problem is always exacerbated, however, at school drop-off times in the morning and pick-up times in the afternoon, when people, for whatever reason, and I could only speculate, don't seem to have their powers of concentration at their peak and park in bizarre ways and in bizarre places and increase the level of hazard. And into that hazardous environment, we're now injecting a driveway serving 17 residences, which currently serve 2, 3 arguably.
Okay, I'm just wondering, to the extent to which, if this were supported, that these residents and their driveway, would be quite familiar with the local circumstances, and perhaps it may be a different case to those people who visit the site and may be causing some of the issues.
Well, if you're referring to the proposed occupants of the development, no doubt they would become familiar with the precinct the longer they live there. Whether they'd be able to achieve the required sight lines when they turn to the left to look up Reilly Street, that is to the north, to exit their property, is another matter. But they've still got to contend with those who are coming through the precinct who are not familiar with it. I mean, I did a very basic analysis of the number of potential collision points. There are 29. Just from the 3 different ways the residents can exit, the 3 different ways they can gain entry through that driveway, and the various different ways that people traversing the intersection can do that or turn into or out of it. There are 29 potential collision points right in front of that driveway.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further questions, Ms. Malecki?
Yes,
Oh, sorry, Elaine, did you have any questions?
I did.
Yeah.
Mr. Whittington, we did all receive all your submissions, so thank you for those. You spoke about errors in the provision of services information, and I think, again, you mentioned a shopping centre. Could you expand on that a little? Thank you.
Yes, I can. It was a question also asked of Tony Gates,
yes,
although I do note that it related to the submission that he was making on behalf of Tony Mcdermott. So it was not his own work, as it were, and I think we'd understand if he didn't himself have the background detail at his fingertips, having made that submission on behalf of someone else. Look, as briefly as I can put it, there was a disability access report which claimed that the Princess Street shops could be accessed on foot at ground level, and that they were no more than the required 450 metres away from the Bannockburn Road entrance to the development. The fact is that the 450 metre route required people to cross on the road. There were no ramps available anywhere on that road and no footpaths on the side of most of it. So if the development, for instance, is to have people with wheelchairs, and it is under Set 55 to provide for people with a disability, wheelchairs or people with prams would have had to make the same crossing across that intersection on the road itself, because there are no ramps and there are no footpaths and there are no pedestrian crossings. So it was misleading to suggest that the trip to Princess Street shops was within 450 metres. The only way to do it on a made footpath is to follow Reilly Street up to the north, go along Pentecost to the lights, cross at the lights, so on and so forth, and that is a distance of 750 metres. Now I note, and I think Mr. Gapes, on behalf of Ms. Mcdermott, referred to that report as now discredited and abandoned, and apparently it has been. It's no longer relied upon, which is just as well, because it was inaccurate. And I cited it as one of many aspects to the application that relied on so-called expert reports which were making what I regard, and I think many others do too, as improbable assumptions that were never challenged by the staff by, for instance, making a request for an independent and expert report rather than one provided by someone employed by the applicant.
Well, that would be quite normal, though, as far as I understand it. Were there any other services that you felt had been or that there were errors about, please, Mr. Whittington?
Well, in that original disability access report, it talked about the bus service to Pymble Station. Pymble Station doesn't have an elevator. The bus service runs only in the afternoons and in the mornings, and not for a period of about 6 or 7 hours in the middle of the day. That was another example. Now, I understand the applicant is now relying on the idea that the occupants will make their way to the 577 bus stop, which is at the corner of Bobbinhead Road and Boomerang, and takes people to Turramurra, which does have disability access at the railway station, although the supermarkets and so forth are actually quite difficult to get to once you get out of that bus. But I was not alluding to them as being inaccuracies. The inaccuracies were in the assertion that the Pymble shops and the Pymble station somehow complied with the requirements, and they didn't, and the applicant abandoned that position.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Coleman, you had a question?
No, I think it's been answered. Thanks very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Whittingham, thank you very much for your time and all your submissions.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Mcdermott says they've all been provided to us all, and we have read them and digested them. So be assured that they're all being considered as part of this assessment.
I note that with thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Crosley, you're speaking on behalf of yourself. Are you there, Mr. Crosley?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. When you're ready.
Okay. Thank you for your time. Please excuse the background noise. I've got 3 front-end loaders constructing at the moment at 79 Bobbinhead Road, so it may be a little bit noisy in the background. I'm a immediate neighbour to the property in question on 83 Bobbinhead Road. We have this construction proposed on 2 of our boundaries, so I'm probably one of the more highly impacted people potentially from this development. So, look, a lot of the issues that I was going to touch on have been covered. There's just one issue I'd like to raise in regard to the access to Bobbinhead Road, and then I'd like to talk about some specific things to my property. So, on the Bobbinhead Road access, I sent through 3 photos of Bobbinhead Road to Kerry this morning. Can I just check that those have been received?
Yeah, she's just said yes, she's received them. So she'll distribute them as part of our later deliberations.
Okay. Those are just over the last month photos that I've taken of disruption to Bobbinhead Road with the developments that are happening currently at 79 and 80 Bobbinhead Road, disruptions of traffic. I'll call your attention specifically to photo 3, which is some traffic management with the truck blocking the entire road at 79. You can see that the traffic is actually backed up with where the traffic management is being placed all the way almost to the traffic lights. So my contention is that any traffic management at 83 is going to have to be even further up Bobbinhead Road and is effectively going to be right on the traffic lights. So you're going to have cars queued right through the intersection with that traffic management plan as the way it's being proposed right now. So I really suggest that you have a look at this, because I see nothing but issues with the way the traffic management on Bobbinhead Road is being proposed right now. And as someone who's lived here for 14 years, I can tell you that the speed of traffic down this road is well in excess of the speed limit. We're talking, cars regularly coming down here at 70, 80 kilometres an hour right past our front door. I tried to get a police report, but unfortunately they won't release it. So this is an accident waiting to happen, as many people have already raised. So I'll move on from that because I think that area has been covered. Specifically on my property, the heavy traffic access into the property is going to transition right up our north side boundary and go over the root structure of tree T74, which is a 100-year-old oak tree. I am seriously concerned about the life expectancy of this tree with the amount of traffic that's going to be transitioning over the root structure and under the canopy. Not to mention it's coming within 2 metres of our boundary, which has a 2.5 metre retaining wall on it. I have no idea about the structural integrity of that wall with that amount of traffic and the weight of that traffic transitioning above that wall. I'm very, very concerned that there's been no real attention paid to our north side boundary in this development application in terms of the structural integrity of it.
That's your time.
Finally,
yeah.
Those are the two main issues.
Oh, okay. All right then. I've just got a question regarding that oak tree and the root structure that's there. Are you suggesting that during the work process that's going to be compromised? The
yes.
construction period?
If you look at the traffic path, it's actually going to pass within about 2.5 metres of the actual trunk of the oak tree, which is on our side of the boundary, but it's right on the boundary.
Right.
So if you look at the traffic diagram, now if you know oak trees, the root structures, they're multiple. They go down and they also go out.
Mm.
So there are surface roots that will be just under the ground where that's being proposed, not to mention all the excavation that's going to happen during the demolition process of 83. So, I'm pretty attached to this tree. I do not want to see it damaged any further than it's already been damaged.
Yeah, I don't blame you on there. Okay, thank you, panel. Do we have any questions of Mr. Crosley?
I have one that was on something he raised, Madam Chair. The retaining wall surely would be part of the dilapidation report. Could staff answer that very quickly?
Maybe we could we go to that maybe after,
Certainly. I thought it might reassure Mr. Crossley.
Oh, okay.
It would be dealt with as part of a dilapidation.
I'm just wondering, maybe it might be easy to deal with later.
Sure.
I'm just concerned we've got all these speakers, that's all, unless it can be answered.
No worries. Thank you. Thanks.
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Coleman. We just have a response here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, what was it?
There will be a pre and post dilapidation report on structures.
There is a pre-proposed report on all structures to be prepared.
Including the retaining wall.
Yeah, there's a condition in the condition 8.
It will include the retaining wall.
It will include the retaining wall.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just clarify?
Yep.
Even though the retaining wall's on our side of the boundary, does that report, and it's effectively our retaining wall, does that report cover that?
Yeah. It would. You would. Your consent will be required by yourself for a dilapidation report to be carried out on your property.
Could you hear that, Mr. Crossley?
Yes, I could. Yep, and happy to offer that. I'm just not sure what that means in terms of if they,
maybe
what's my recourse. So maybe we take it offline.
Take that offline, and we'll get the staff member to contact you directly to explain that and run that through with you.
Okay, thank you.
Of course, subject to the final decision today. Mr. Coleman, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. You spoke with considerable detail and I think it was an extremely thoughtful analysis of the traffic conditions in Bobbin Head Road and the likelihood of risks and danger during construction. Now, this is perhaps a hypothetical question, but would it be fair to say that the conditions you're talking about may apply to any construction site in Bobbin Head Road? Even if a single house was to be redeveloped, then the construction team would have to look at the conditions that you talked about and an appropriate traffic management plan developed. So can you perhaps throw a little light on my question, which is, to what extent is this proposal going to be of such concern in the traffic context as to warrant refusal when a single house being developed on that frontage might well be something that we could accept. Do you take my point?
Yes, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Look, the way I think the easiest answer to that is it's the sheer volume of traffic that's being proposed for this development accessing through one very narrow pinch point. It's not just Bobbin Head Road, it's actually the position in Bobbin Head Road that's the issue. This is, if you're familiar with outside of 81 and 83, it's effectively the narrowest point in the entire length of Bobbin Head Road.
Yes.
So, you know, the photos that I've sent you are for single developments that are happening right now at 79 and 80 Bobbin Head Road. So this is disruption from, I would assume, approved developments. I would assume they've been approved. And you can start to see that a single property development is causing this level of disruption. So imagine with this level of traffic, how much more that disruption is going to be and the position that it's going to be in. You know, that, I mean, I can't say anything more than, you know, just project forward and just imagine this issue that I've sent these photos on multiplied by 5, 6, 7.
Yes. Okay. I understand that. And my familiarity with the site is sufficient to satisfy me that you've got a pretty good point. What's going through my mind, though, is the question as to whether it is reasonable to contemplate any kind of major construction site anywhere on Bobbin Head Road in the future. Has it reached that point?
I think that's probably a little bit too far. I mean, I'm sure there are positions that on Bobbin Head Road where it can happen safely. It's just, you know, if this was a single property development, it could probably be managed. But the fact that it's an access for effectively 18 buildings and 4 demolitions, I think that's a specific issue around this site.
Yeah. So it's a matter of scale.
Yeah.
And
it's a scale issue.
Yes. In an ideal world, we would have been able to split the traffic loads between Bobbin Head Road and Bannockburn Road, for example. I'm just hypothesizing
yes.
at the moment.
And the gentleman who earlier raised that issue about through traffic, I mean, I think, you know, in the perfect world, if there weren't the issues that are on the other side, you'd have through traffic going from Bobbin Head Road and exiting onto Riley. Or really, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. No further questions, panel?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crossley. That was very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now we have Ms. van der Heuvel speaking. You're the president of the P&C Pymble Public School, so thank you for coming and putting your position. Are you there?
Thank you. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. When you're ready.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I represent the several thousand people who make up the broader community associated with the 650 children who attend Pymble Public School, which is located less than 100 metres from this proposed development. The development faces an intersection traversed by dozens of vehicles and hundreds of pedestrians during the morning school drop-off and afternoon pick-up times. Most of those on foot are children between the ages of 5 and 12, plus parents, carers, siblings, including babies in prams. If you're entering the intersection by car or on foot, lines of visibility are numerous, confusing and restricted. There are no pedestrian crossings. Only 2 of the 6 footpaths are paved. One of those is on the western side of Bannockburn Road, which will be crossed by the one entry exit serving 17 of the proposed residences of this development, the precise spot that most pedestrians use to navigate this intersection. That driveway will also serve all the service vehicles, garbage deliveries, removal of tradespeople, etc. When exiting those vehicles, we'll approach the crossing on the way to the school from behind. I'm aware that others have made detailed submissions on these hazards. One shows that there is a total of 29 potential collision points between vehicles entering and exiting the driveway to and from various directions available to them, and through traffic vehicles using the various paths available to traverse the intersection. The driveway location currently serves 2 residences. It is now proposed to serve 17. What is the mathematical probability that an accident will occur? Another neighbour's observation of the intersection between 2:50 p.m. and 3:10 p.m. on a school day tallied more than 90 vehicle movements and more than 100 pedestrian movements in the 20-minute period. I can't pretend to know much about New South Wales planning law, but I'm told that in general criteria is to quote, the suitability of the site for development. and that the SEP 55 developments must be on a suitable site and be of good design. For the children dodging cars and the over 55 dodging children, I can't think of a less suitable site. Because of the time constraint, I've confined my remarks here to the scenario once the development is complete and occupied. I'm confident others today will demonstrate that the construction period obviously will pose a much, much greater threat to child safety. On behalf of the PNC, I completely support these submissions and I ask you to reject the DA. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well put. Panel members, do we have any questions? No, the only one I have is the submissions so far, and we're only up to number 8.
Yeah.
The pedestrian crossing around that school seems to been raised a couple of times. Is that a submission the PNC's made to the Ku-ring-gai Local Traffic Committee previously to get that looked at?
I'd have to double check that with the school. I do believe it is an issue that has been going on for many, many years, though, that we have some major traffic management plan issues, and we've asked council for help over the years, and nothing seems to really happen with that.
Right, okay. All right, well, thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time to come and speak with us.
Thank you so much.
The next speaker today is Mr. Mackay, and speaking on behalf of himself. Mr. Mackay, are you there? You with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Madam
can.
Chair?
Yes, when
Right,
you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So our home at 100 Bannockburn Road is surrounded on 2 boundaries by the development. I strongly agree with the other presentations regarding the community impacts, but can't elaborate and don't want to duplicate. The LEC, the Land Environment Court, is a higher authority than the planning panel, and I think it would be a bold panel indeed decides to overturn the rulings of 2 commissioners of the LEC, for that is what the council is actually recommending. I therefore urge the panel, I beg your pardon, to read the LEC ruling with great care and attention. 2 LEC commissioners agreed with council's arguments that Bobbin Head Road frontage was insufficient and that the development was not in the public interest. It also refused on other grounds. The developer tried to sell the development site but could not find a buyer because it is an inappropriate site. Council spent $140,268 of ratepayers' money defending its contentions in the Land and Environment Court. That was the 4th highest cost out of 79 cases for that reporting year. Council is now arguing the opposite of its previous evidence for a development that has gone from 14 to 18 dwellings, demonstrably even less in the public interest. This is more than troubling when most of the community impacts remain unaddressed. Block D's balcony looks into our pool area. At 3 notifications, I made submissions on privacy impacts to our home, but still no privacy features have been added to address them. The panel should not approve on a promise without seeing what type of privacy features and on which windows and balconies. If they are not on the plans, they will not be installed. 3 LEC commissioners have been to my property to assess the privacy and solar access impacts. Only by standing in the properties of the affected neighbours can such impacts be assessed. I extended a written invitation to panel members on the 7th of August to do this. East and west elevations show that Block D is oppressively high, looming over my property and those on Bobbin Head Road also. It is 9.9 metres in height and exceeding the development control plan. Bulk, scale and height are out of character with the streetscape. My garage and retaining wall right on the boundary. I note the remarks about the dilapidation reports, but the assessment report tells us that we, the neighbours, do not get to see those dilapidation reports, and I want to flag that. The panel has arrived at the same conclusion as council 15 times in a row now. The community hopes that this inappropriate DA will be a chance for the panel to demonstrate their expertise, their due diligence, and an ability to reach independent evidence-based conclusions. That's the end of my personal presentation.
Thank you.
Chair.
Panel members?
Yes, I've got a question. It's a very minor matter, I have to admit, but I'd like to have an explanation. Jim Coleman here. You talk about streetscape impacts. Can you enlighten me about what that might mean?
Yes, certainly. If you look at the western and eastern elevations that are in the plans, you will see that Block D is way out of proportion to all of the other buildings on both Bobbinhead Road and on Bannockburn Road. It actually breaches the development control plan's height. I understand that the ceiling heights of 8 metres have been met, and I'm not contending that. But if you look at the ridge height, which impacts my solar access in my backyard, and also has a visual impact on the streetscape, you'll note that it is 9.9 metres high, which is in violation of the development control plan.
Yes, I'm still
over 9.9.
Thank you. But if I was walking down Bannockburn Road, looking towards your place, towards the proposal, I mean,
yeah,
would I be able to experience that elevation in such a way as to lead me to think that the streetscape has been adversely impacted?
I think so. If you were walking down the eastern side of Bannockburn Road, it would be incredibly obvious because it just towers over my house. The elevations speak for themselves on both Bobbinhead and Bannockburn Road.
So I think it's the relationship of the proposal to your house, which is probably more important to you than any glimpses that a passerby might get from Bannockburn Road.
With all due respect, that's more than a glimpse. And yes, the impact to me in terms of solar access is marginal now, but privacy, I definitely have a big issue. The balcony, 17 square metre balcony and G09 and Block D look straight into my pool area. So
yes,
that's part of the scale issue as well.
Yes, I understand. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Panel members, anyone else wishes to ask a question? No. Thank you, Ms. Mackay. Thank you very much. You've got 2 others. You're speaking for 2 others. Is that correct?
That's correct. 2 of my neighbours who can't attend today.
Oh, sorry. I should have held back the questions until you finished. All right. Well, that's fine. Can I ask you now to speak on behalf of Mr. Mcdermott and Mr. Wang? And if you could just do them both. And then we'll ask questions if anything arises after you've done that. Thank you.
Certainly, Madam Chair. Thank you. Okay, Sean McDonough has said, I made a submission against the development on the 14th of October 2019 by email. Council has no record of that. How many other submissions has Council mislaid? My house at 69 Bannockburn is on the corner opposite the proposed driveway. It has a 270-degree view of the intersection. We already have many problems with traffic and parking, especially at school drop-off and pick-up time. Pedestrian traffic as such, that's pedestrian traffic of parents and children as such that a hard dirt path has been beaten on the nature strip around our property, with many children crossing the road at the point of entry of the proposed development. Residents have submitted many photos showing school kids crossing and dodging traffic at that point. I'm aware of several accidents that have occurred at this junction over the years. My own daughter's car was written off whilst parked outside, and the same thing happened to the neighbours at 100 Bannockburn Road with their car. Last October, one neighbour spent an afternoon counting the vehicle pedestrian movements between 2:45 and 3:10 on that intersection. There were 129 pedestrian crossings and 96 vehicle movements in 25 minutes. In one 10-minute period, 52 pedestrians shared the zone with 90 vehicles. This kind of pattern happens twice a day, and also when events are on at the school on weekends, things like fates and elections, etc. It's reckless to put a driveway for 19 car spaces into such an intersection. It is already dangerous and confusing to motorists. Someone will die or be seriously injured. The driveway could go on Bobbinhead Road to avoid this danger. Council's assessment report admits the intersection is in a bad place for the driveway and that it is prohibited under Australian standards. Our state MP has made a submission concerned about the danger from locating it there. Also, the plan elevations show Block D will dominate the streetscape. Well, he's just going over the same thing I did, so I'll skip that for time purposes. There are too many things wrong with this DA. The reasons the LEC refused it in 2017 still remain problems. It is definitely not in the public interest and should be refused. That's the end of Sean McDonough's presentation.
Thank you. Could you just now go into Mr. Wang's?
Yes, I will. Mr. Wang lives at 98, which is it's next door to me. and he is a directly affected neighbour as well. As an immediate neighbour to DA 0342/19, we not only share concerns with other community members about the school kids' safety, traffic and parking, but also have our own issues. And he has 3 points. Point 1, the retaining wall between 102 Bannockburn Road and 98 Bannockburn is already shattered and crashed. The amended landscape architecture additional information specified existing wall to southern boundary to be retained. This wall doesn't even hold existing soil, let alone more structures on top of it. Now, point 2, the shadow diagram of this development has not considered our new house since 2017 when the DA was first submitted. 2 years later, the developer still ignores the fact that there is a brand new house on the neighbouring land and that the new development's shadow diagram is still drawn based on the original dwelling, much smaller dwelling from many years ago. Point 3, the windows in the houses of Block D will have direct visual access to our backyard. I believe there are 16 of these with no privacy features. We will have zero privacy in our backyard. He then goes on to elaborate on the retaining wall being between 102 and 98 was very shaky and dangerous. The road base and soil behind the retaining wall poses significant risk to us. We told the developer we have 2 young kids and we needed this retaining wall fixed as soon as possible. Still, it took them more than 4 months before they agreed to come and put a temporary fence to prevent the soil from crashing down into our backyard. This simply shows how ignorant and careless this developer is towards community and neighbourhood. I can only imagine that situation will get worse if the construction is approved to begin, as the developer will rush to gain their financial benefits and put community's welfare aside. The above 3 issues were raised against the first and second DA submitted in 2018. The DA was subsequently rejected by the Land and Environment Court. I am hardly convinced that this new DA differs from previous ones sufficiently enough to qualify for approval. And that, Madam Chairman, is the end of Phil Wang's presentation.
Thank you for reading them on behalf of those your neighbours. Panel members, do we have any questions arising? No, it doesn't look like it. Thank you very much for coming along and speaking. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Mr. Eagle, Ron Eagle, are you there? Yes, you are. I can see you there. You're probably looking for the button to unmute. Mr. Eagle? Might come back to Mr. Eagle. He's there. He may have just walked away from his phone for a minute. Jane Pape? Jane Pape? There's Jane, she's there as well. No, we'll come back to Jane. Guy Howes, Mr. Howes, are you there?
Good afternoon.
Oh, thank you.
Good afternoon.
We haven't bored you and you've left us.
No, I'm not bored. I'm actually fascinated by the quality and quantity of submissions. So thank you, Chair and panel, for taking my submission. Most of my issues have been dealt with already. That is to say, the inadequacy of on-site parking post-completion of the development. You know, on mathematically, there'll be 32 vehicles which need to park, and there's only 20 spots on site. If you stick those cars on Reilly Street, you're exacerbating an already bad situation there. The second piece is the traffic management during construction, right? I've read the traffic management plan, both the original one and the subsequent one. I find it breathtaking that it's expected that the developer can manage the conflict of interest in controlling the traffic on site. I think at a bare minimum, the developer should be required to fund the employment of 2 council staff, one at each entrance, to ensure that the traffic management obligations that he makes are complied with. I really don't see how you can anticipate that the developer will work against his own commercial interest to comply with something that's not monitored or policed. The second piece that I'm not sure has been dealt with enough is the community benefit. As far as I'm aware, the council has no control over who these things are sold to. So you won't know whether there's
Ron
people
Eagle
52.
Join the meeting.
You won't know whether or not these developments, these units are sold to people that are over 55 or disabled. So, the benefit to the community enshrined in the legislation that allows these kind of developments is not demonstrated in this instance, or in that instance. Finally, just an observation on this afternoon's proceedings, and I've never been through this before, but much of the querying from the panel seems to focus on the point that a process has been followed in making this application. My point on that would be that no matter the compliance with the process, the quality of the application doesn't warrant approval. It might be a compliant application, but for all the reasons that have been articulated, it's a very good one. And I think that's it from me.
Short and sweet. That's very good. Panel members, any questions of Mr. Howes?
No, Madam.
So, yes, I have one.
Jim Coleman?
Jim Coleman, yes. I'm starting to get a much clearer picture of the construction impacts for this project, and putting aside whether or not those impacts are tolerable or acceptable for the moment, let's take ourselves to the point where the last brick has been laid and the new tenants move in. And I'd like, if someone could, perhaps the most recent speaker, enlighten me on what might be the difference between the traffic conditions today on both roads and what they might be when the construction is complete and the new tenants have moved in with their cars and their visitors and so on.
Yes, I can certainly provide some perspective on that, or at least I can provide my own perspective on that. There are 18 units in this development. They will be sold, I would imagine, in this area for two-unit developments, two-bedroom units. They will be sold for between $1.3 and $2 million each. That's quite a lot of money for a two-unit site, and the people that are buying them are likely to be well-funded. They will have a car each. If you assume that the people that are buying them are partnered, and they probably will be, I think it's a safe assumption to think that there'll be two cars per lot.
Yes.
So that makes for 36 cars. Even if you assume that there's only 3/4 of them are partnered and have two cars, then that makes for 14 times 2 is 28 plus 4 is 32. 32 cars. You've got 20 parks on site. There's 12 cars. Now, if I had to choose between parking on Reilly Street and Bobbin Head Road, I'd be parking on Reilly Street because Bobbin Head Road is just too busy. You'd get your driver's side door knocked off every time you opened it. Yeah. So they'll be parked on Reilly Street and down Bannockburn, and they'll be parked in the school zone. You're going to have children put at risk at the very least. So in my view, you're looking at mathematically 12, possibly 20 cars parking on the Reilly Street and Bannockburn roadsides just around that dogleg. And it's horrific. I'm at 82 Bannockburn. I drive up Bannockburn along Reilly and left onto Pentecost to take my kids to their schools occasionally. And there's been some renovation work being done on a street on Reilly Street over the last, 3 months. The construction workers' cars on Reilly Street have made it essentially one lane each way. It's a nightmare. So, to suggest that even if we get through the construction piece, that the post-construction parking will be satisfactory, it's a myth. It's a nonsense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Right. Oh.
Except to say that really a lot of these matters should be directed at the state member, because unfortunately state instruments override council's instruments. So parking and so on these developments really isn't anything to do with council. This is why.
Yes, but I do understand that the panel can make whatever decision it likes. Right? You can make a decision.
Mr. Howes,
that differs from the recommendation.
Mr. Howes, can I just comment on that? The panel does, and we're here as a consent authority to make a decision based on the assessment done, we also have to comply ourselves. We can't go outside of the current planning proposal. So what Ms. Malecki is saying is the SEP is the leading and guiding planning instrument on this today, and that's what's going to guide our decision. So whilst we can and have to take into consideration the assessment of council, we also take into consideration the submissions made, but ultimately we're guided by the state planning instrument, which is what Ms. Malecki is commenting on.
Yes.
So it's not a matter of us not going against council or going with the state or vice versa. It's about us as having requirements of a consent authority to comply with the planning laws as at the date of assessment, and the guiding planning proposal is the SEP. So we have to.
Well, okay. Let me rephrase my assertion then, and that is that there have always been arguments put forward that this development is non-compliant, and therefore you're within your rights to decline it.
Well, that's something the panel will deliberate over today. So thank you for highlighting that to us, and as everyone else has today, and everyone's submissions will be considered in our deliberation. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Next speaker is Miss Marwad. Sorry if I've mispronounced that. Sarah. Are you
Yes,
there?
that's me. Sorry. Yeah, it's tricky one to pronounce, that's fine. Take it however you do it.
Sarah, thank you. When you're ready.
Okay, so my family and I, we live at number 85 Bobbinhead Road, so we're right next door to number 83, obviously, which is the Bobbinhead Road frontage site for this development. So a few points to make. Firstly, this collection of 4 blocks of land were purchased knowingly creating this sort of obscure L-shaped consolidated lot on which the current development is now proposed. And the result of this obscure L shape is that the frontage site that fronts Bobbinhead Road is not compliant with the SEP development standards. It's 8.6% narrower than is allowed by the SEP development standards. And this was the basis of the rejection from the Land Environment Court in 2018, basically that it was significantly less than required to meet the standard, and that overall this contributed to making the proposal not in the public interest. It's difficult for us to understand that a rewording of the developer's clause 4.6 exemption application suddenly results in a non-compliant frontage width no longer being an issue, and the conversion of 4 dwellings into 18 is now in the public interest. The frontage width on Bobbinhead Road is 18.2 metres, and that does not comply with the SEP standards. This failure to comply with this standard results in the pedestrian thoroughfare, which I believe is also a requirement from the SEP standards, opening up from the Bannockburn-Reilly Street side directly into the driveway of the house fronting Bobbinhead Road, so Block A. So there is no separate pedestrian thoroughfare once it gets to Block A. It is in their driveway, which is not only dangerous to pedestrians, but also dangerous to the drivers who are going to be reversing out of that driveway, as there is no room to do a U-turn in the driveway and come out forward-facing onto Bobbinhead Road. This thoroughfare clearly has had to be squeezed into the block due to the fact that it is simply not wide enough to fit the required side boundaries and the house and the driveway and the pedestrian thoroughfare on the narrow block. So furthermore, the retention of only 3 trees from our side boundary with number 83, which spans over 56 metres and currently has more than 30 trees and shrubs, will have a significant impact on not only the streetscape of Bobbinhead Road, but also our visual and acoustic privacy, which is also in contradiction to a SEP development standard. This section of Bobbinhead Road has been largely protected from large-scale development for a long time, given that it's more than 1 kilometre down from the Pacific Highway. It's known for the tree-lined streets and amenity, and the fact that most dwellings in this section are actually barely visible from the street through the greenery and the trees that line the fronts of the blocks. This will be so different after the removal of so many trees, regardless of the proposed landscaping plans, which repeatedly reference the green corridor, but make no reference to replacing the thick privacy screen currently separating our house, particularly our master bedroom, ensuite and study, and backyard from number 83. The significant size electricity substation that is required to be built out the front of number 83 to ensure sufficient electricity is now available to this vast increase in dwelling numbers is also completely exposed to the street,
with no attempt to conceal it, and this will just add to this negative impact of the streetscape. Additionally, we echo David Mackay's concerns that Block D is actually visible from Bobbinhead Road as it towers over from the Bannockburn side. So lastly, the council's report refers to the building height measured from the ceiling height. However, the New South Wales State Government Planning Portal specifically states that building height refers to the height of the highest point of the building, including any chimneys or lift overhangs from the existing ground level. And if this is the case, then there are multiple dwellings that are non-compliant with the SEPT development standards, which states that they must not exceed 8 metres. Would the planning panel please confirm that all buildings will not exceed 8 metres in height? And then if I have just 2 seconds to just quickly say that we propose that the SEPT development standards should hold some significant gravity with these proposals and be upheld and not easily skirted around just by cleverly worded exemption applications. And the message should be clear to developers that if a site is not compliant or a proposal is seeking numerous variations, then it's just not appropriate to be purchased with these plans in mind, and it's not appropriate for these sort of developments. And we would implore the planning panel and the chair to convey the same message to developers and help preserve the neighbourhood amenity and streetscape of this area. That's the end of that.
Great, thank you. Members, any questions?
No, Madam Chair.
No, great. Thank you very much, Sarah, for coming along and speaking today.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you. Now we've got
Madam Chair.
Eagle's returned, is that right?
Yes, I was going to say that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Eagle. You there? Mr. Eagle? Ron? What about Jane Pape? Is Jane?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, Ron, there we go. Yeah, we can hear you, Ron. Hello? Sorry, Jane. No, it's answered. Hello. Thank you, Jane. We'll come back to you next. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Ron?
My apologies for the mix-up.
That's okay. We can hear you. So when you're ready.
Okay, my background in the building and construction industry providing public infrastructure includes 10 years as Chief Engineer, Public Works Department, and 2 years as Administrator at Maitland Council. My previous position is pro-development, but delivering it in a professionally and socially responsible way. Over the years, I've extensively used and at times contributed to the creation of industry standards. I'll concentrate now, though, on the proposed driveway in what the Australian standard describes as a prohibited location. The assessment relies on the standard's provision that the prohibited location classification, and I quote, shall not apply to any access driveway serving a property which would otherwise be denied access due to the physical impossibility of meeting the requirement, unquote. The operative words are physical impossibility. The site actually has 4 existing access driveways. It's quite wrong to suggest that physical access to the site is denied. The site borders onto 3 streets. If a complying access point cannot be found, that is surely not a trigger to overlook the relevance of the prohibited zone. Rather, it suggests that the site is not really suited to the scale and layout proposed. I wonder what prompted Council to explore other access options. One with a site distance of 35 metres against the required 45 metres or desirable 69 metres was rightly discarded. The location now proposed has site distances of around 15 metres and 29 metres, well short of the required 45 metres. That location should similarly be discarded. The 15 metres could be improved by removing 7 mature trees up to 5 metres high from the nature strip at the front of the neighbouring properties. Is that really what Council wants? It goes well beyond the simple pruning that has been suggested. Statutory requirements are that the development should fit in with the existing environment, not vice versa. The location proposed also coincides with where school children cross. Council rightly insists that construction traffic avoid that area, but the children will be exposed to the same hazards from the completed project. The access location proposed is also not permitted by council's own standards. Ignoring its own standard is not a practice to be recommended. In summary, an alternative location has been rejected on one basis, being inadequate site distances. The one proposed should be rejected on 4 grounds: prohibited location, site distances, school children, and unnecessary risk for exiting seniors and disabled. I've detailed these issues in my written submissions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Eagle. We've got your written submission, so thank you. We've all seen that. Panel members, do you have any questions, Mr Eagle?
No.
No? No. Great. Thank you very much for coming back to us and speaking today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you. Ms Pape.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can, Jane. Thank you. Sorry to do that before. When you're ready.
That's right. No problem at all. Yes, thank you for the time. And it's been a long-winded process, and I thank you for your patience in hearing all these submissions. But I think perhaps we all need a lot more patience if this development goes ahead with 62 weeks of trucks going past our properties. I've lived locally here for more than 20 years and raised 3 children who have attended Pymble Public, and I wish to strongly object to this proposal. Much of what I've prepared to present has already been covered, so I apologise for some repetition. I have sort of quickly cut a few lines out. There are, in fact, not just the 27 people presenting today who object to this. There are, in fact, hundreds of frustrated and concerned families who do not want this proposal. This DA completely disregards the community sentiment of the 600 young families associated with the school. The community has never wanted this type of development so close to the school because it is not safe. We objected to this type of proposal 3 years ago, and we object again now. We ask the panel to please explain how this DA differs to now qualify for approval from the proposal rejected by the Land and Environment Court. There's been a lot of discussion about the dangers of trucks and traffic, but I would ask, has the panel received any independent surveys about the number of children who ride their bikes along the pavement and cross the road at Bobbin Head, not just near the Pymble Public end, but also the Montessori School end? Can the panel give complete assurance that not one child or pedestrian will be put in danger from heavy vehicles turning into the site during the demolition and construction phase? Can the panel please explain how the construction traffic management plan, including parking, will be realistically policed, and are the fines an adequate deterrent to the inevitable breaches? Has the panel considered the compounding problem of multiple developments all underway at the same time? This DA cannot be considered in isolation. The panel has already approved the highly contentious 70 Ku-ring-gai Street development, and it is likely both developments will be underway at the same time. The high volume of heavy trucks will cause hazardous traffic chaos at the Ku-ring-gai Street Bobbin Head intersection. Can the panel give complete assurance there will be no accidents? Has any member of the panel walked along Bobbin Head Road and seen the sight lines and how dangerous it will be for cars travelling south when they go over the crest of the hill and encounter a huge truck waiting to turn into the site? Furthermore, this DA must not go ahead because the parking on site is insufficient, especially for seniors and people with disability. 20 parking spaces for 18 units. This may be compliant according to the regulations, but it will be inadequate. Seniors and people with disability have more visitors than other residences, as they need more assistance and require daily visits from carers, cleaners, doctors, as well as family and friends. On-street parking is not safe or practical, and limited visitor parking will disadvantage and isolate these residents from the care they need.
Thanks, Ms. Payne.
Finally, I just wish to say I and many others are praying that the panel exercise great wisdom, that they act with integrity, and that they take the time to properly discern the soul of this community and the needs of this community. We ask you, please, to reject this DA.
Thank you, Ms. Pape. That's a lot for us to take on. Panel members, any questions? No, thank you very much, and thank you very for your sincere submission. That was well spoken.
Thank you for listening.
Ms. McConnell, you're speaking on behalf of Ms. Worth.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. We can hear you, so when you're ready, you can commence.
Thank you. My name is Moy McConnell. I live at 33 Bannockburn Road, Pymble. For 2 years until the end of 2017, I was the P&C president of Pymble Public Schools, including at the time an earlier iteration of this DA was notified in late 2017. I make this presentation on behalf of Robin Worth. Robin has lived for 44 years at 92 Bannockburn, 4 houses down from the intersection onto which the driveway from the 17 of the units empties. As I was, for many years, Robin has been witness to the car parking and pedestrian chaos that occurs twice daily in the school precinct as children are dropped off and collected and older children traverse the intersection alone and on foot. There could not be a more inappropriate location for development of the size envisaged. Robin has, as I have, witnessed the demographic of people moving into the neighbourhood that send their children and grandchildren to Pymble Public School changing over the last few years. This is absolutely not a slight in any way, but is a simple fact. Robin and I have witnessed firsthand the grim reality of people who are not 100% familiar with Australian road rules, both from a driving and pedestrian perspective, and therefore witnessed the number of accident near misses increasing around the school at all times, but particularly at pick-up and drop-off times. This goes to the heart of the panel's earlier question about whether it is residents or just visitors passing by that are unfamiliar with the H intersection that are subject to increased danger from the development in this location. The proposed development is 100 metres away from the large and growing Pymble Public and proposed to be located at an intersection with dozens of potential collision points, even before you inject children, ageing drivers, residents who are not as familiar with Australian road rules and pedestrian rules as they should be, not to mention the lack of visitor and services parking in the complex. Finally, ratepayers might wonder why their council devoted a year of energy and resources to successfully opposing the idea in the Land and Environment Court, spending more than $140,000 on legal fees, according to the annual report, only to then devote nearly another year processing and approving a near identical proposal on the same site. At what cost to council's budget and at what risk to the safety of school kids? Thank you.
Thank you. Moy, just on that last bit, and just for other speakers today, this did go to the Land Environment Court and it was a different proposal. We're putting that aside for a minute. The applicant is entitled to make another application to council, and council is required to assess that application. So the fact that the council has done an assessment on a subsequent application on this site is part of their statutory obligation to do so, and it should be viewed in that light and not viewed in a negative that there's some other alternative or other motive behind why they've done that. And I know that's not what you're suggesting, but it's just good for everyone to note and understand that an owner of any land can make multiple applications, and if they're submitted, they are to be assessed in accordance with the planning framework. So please don't see that as anything other than for what it is. They're just doing what they need to do and have to do under their statutory requirements as a local government authority. Panel members, do we have any questions of Moy? No?
No.
No. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming along and speaking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Sinclair, are you there? I can't. Oh, there he is. Neil, are you there? Can you hear us? If not, we'll come back. Neil's actually speaking on a couple of people. Mary McCulley. Mary, you there?
Oh,
Neil, we've got
hello,
Neil.
Madam Chair.
Yes, there you are. We've got you. Fantastic.
Thank
You're
you.
speaking on behalf of yourself and Miss Zhou. Is that right? Yep.
Yes, correct.
If you could just speak for yourself, make your own submission, and then when your time ends, go into the second submission, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, panel. My name is Neil Sinclair. I'm an immediate neighbour of the development at 4 Reilly Street. My submission is on the privacy, setback and noise issues of the development. Our privacy will be drastically impacted by the large number of units, the addition of 5 balconies and length of boundary ground floor terraces, meaning 7 outdoor living spaces facing our southern boundary. Privacy, the level 1 block B unit 101 still has a large balcony positioned directly into our backyard, swimming pool, laundry and master bedroom, severely impacting their privacy. While some screening has been added, the height of the wall at 1.6 does not completely prevent overlooking into our backyard pool area. We'd like that raised to a minimum of 1.8 metres. The windows facing have no privacy features, specifically the living bedroom, master bedroom windows on unit 1.01 and the living windows on unit 1.02. This was clearly, visible during earlier Section 34 conference visits. In Unit 1.02, its outside balcony looks directly into our children's bedrooms. Why no privacy screens on the windows? We would ask. Figure 7, page 83 of the assessment report gives a misleading view of the gap between our property and blocks B and C, as the two diagrams appear to have been pulled together to give an incorrect view of the gap between the two. This greatly misrepresents the overlooking into our bedrooms from block B and C, which privacy screens would alleviate. Setbacks, the DA has a setback of 5 metres only, which contravenes the DCP. The DCP states where the dwellings are oriented towards side boundaries and or have openings to habitable rooms towards side boundaries, the setback is to be minimum of 6 metres, where in fact we're facing 3 metres for the ground floor terraces and 5 metres for the balconies, with the 7 outdoor living spaces. Noise, the noise impacts are obviously greatly enhanced with those 7 outdoor living areas. That hasn't been properly assessed by the development. Outdoor areas should be located different places. In closing, I would sort of echo those comments around the dilapidation report, and actually that being made available to all immediate residents. And finally, the site's had a very checkered history, including failure at the LEC, non-compliant driveway and street frontages. The site remains unsuitable, particularly its close proximity to Thimble Public School, and the risks the development would add to an already dangerous corner. The development remains not in the public interest, and I would ask the panel to kick it out. Thank you. On behalf of Oliver Zhu, Oliver resides at 79 Bobbin Head Road. Oliver's main issues are around privacy. Oliver states the following is looking into his backyard. The southern side of Block B, Unit G05, has one unscreened window and terrace without any privacy features. The southern side of Block B, Unit 104, has one unscreened window and a terrace without any privacy features. The western side of Block D, Unit G08, has 3 unscreened windows and a balcony without any privacy features. The western side of Block D, Unit LG02, has 3 sliding glass doors, a terrace and 2 unscreened windows without any privacy features. Oliver considers these unacceptable intrusions into his privacy, and states the developers made no effort whatsoever to protect his privacy, and the design is unsatisfactory regarding the design guidelines for this reason. Oliver has made some issues around parking, which I think has been covered off earlier by Mr. Crossley, because Oliver's place is right next door to Mr. Crossley's at 81 Bobbin Head. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Panel members, questions of Mr. Sinclair? None. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sinclair, for coming and making that submissions on behalf of your neighbour as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, panel.
Thank you. Mary McCulley. I can see you there, Mary. Can you unmute?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Mary McCulley at 4 Reilly Street, next door to the site. My partner Neil has just made the presentation to you about the immediate impacts on our home. We live next to the proposed driveway onto the intersection of Bannockburn Road and Reilly Street. I have a first-hand eyewitness perspective on the dangers inherent in that location daily. As others have said, the driveway is in a location prohibited by Australian standards and Ku-ring-gai Council's own standards. Even if the panel accepts the developer's different interpretation of that standard, there remains the issue of sight lines, which are also the subject of Australian standards. These are a matter of fact rather than interpretation. The minimum sight line prescribed by the Australian standard in a 50k zone is 45 metres in both directions. The desirable sight lines recommended is 59 metres in the 50k zone. The New South Wales Roads and Traffic Authority recommends trying to achieve the sight lines which would be applicable under Australian standards for a speed limit 10k greater than which actually applies. Under that guideline, the minimum sight distance for a 60k speed limit is 55 metres and the desirable more than 65. These sightline standards apply to so-called normal situations. Given the pedestrian interface during school drop-off and pick-up times, this is hardly a normal situation, particularly when ageing and old drivers are ejected into it. Surely such circumstances would demand the Australian standard desirable sightlines be achieved, but we don't even have the minimum. I note the applicant hasn't even specified sight distances, but the most casual examination would confirm that the sight distance standards aren't met, a major safety issue. A neighbour has calculated them as follows. To the south, the sight line is 15 metres because of the curbside vegetation, including quite mature trees. This was mentioned previously by Mr. Eagle. To the north, the sight line is 20 metres. It's not possible to improve that because Reilly Street is an angle of at least 30 degrees to Bannockburn Road. You simply can't see around corners. This is not a normal T intersection as the applicant is arguing, apparently. It is not even T in shape. Residents exiting the property and looking north toward Reilly Street are required to turn 120 degrees to their left to see traffic approaching from just 20 metres away along a stretch of road, which is not even covered by the 40k school speed zone limit. I have a professional point to put across. As a practicing physiotherapist, I know that elderly people have a restricted range of neck motion, and some would not be able to move their heads far enough and fast enough to exit safely. Just the other day, I had a near miss exiting our driveway as a car sped up Bannockburn Road, having right of way turning up into Reilly Street. Frightening to think that if this development proceeds, it could be responsible for many accidents or even fatalities. Finally, I asked the panel, does Bobbin Road have any sight issues? Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Panel members, questions? No, none. Thank you very much for coming and making your point today.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Ms. Terracini? Emily? Emily, are you there? You're there, I can see you. Emily Terracini? We might come back to Emily. Paul Lumley? Oh, Paul, you're there? Can you? Yep, thank you. You're unmuted. Thank you very much.
Hi there. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Paul.
Yes.
Really, when you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I've got two presentations, one on my own behalf and one on behalf of Sue Gapes. My first one would be about parking, and I think that's been covered to a fairly detailed level. Mr. Howe's covered it especially well, and I do want to concur with all of his conclusions, and especially on the real world analysis of how many parking or the overflow parking that would happen on a development like this in this area. I don't think it is real world to assume that there would only be one car per unit. So there would absolutely be overflow parking if there wasn't more parking supplied on site. The site needs to be self-sufficient, and by its design, it isn't. The other point I wanted to make about parking also is about the fact that Reilly Street, as all of the residents around here, and I live on 6 Reilly Street, by the way, which is about 2 doors down
Emily
from where this
Terracini.
proposed.
Joined the meeting.
So 6 Reilly Street, which is about 2 doors down from where the development would be. Reilly Street, as we all know, it's a rat run for peak hour traffic between Bobbin Head Road and Pacific Highway, and it's particularly busy in the afternoon school pickup time when all of the traffic is concentrated around that 3 o'clock closing of school time, which coincides with the tradie traffic as well. And we know that tradies love their rat runs and quite often disregard the rules of, you know, the local road rules on their desire to get home. So Reilly Street, especially outside our place, is quite narrow, and especially when parking is on both sides of the road, it really is a single lane thoroughfare. So with blind corners, when cars are parked on both sides, any additional cars parked at that time would create congestion and dangers to school children, which I think is completely unacceptable. If the development can't be made to be self-sufficient and decrease that on-street parking demand, then it must be rejected. Now, on behalf of Ms. Gapes, I believe this one is also about a topic which is about the sight lines of the exit point of the driveway, and Ms. McCulley has covered this one pretty well, actually, with her professional opinion of the neck limitations of our older generation with the 120-degree twist to the left that would be required to see up Reilly Street adequately to get a sight line. I think she's covered that quite well. So that's all from me.
Great, thank you very much. Questions, panel? Mr.
Yes,
yes,
Madam Chair.
Levy, thank you. We've got a question from Lumley. Thank you. Just hold on.
Thanks, Mr. Lumley. I'm just wondering what your experience has been with people, I guess, complying with the giveaway sign at the end of Reilly Street, and particularly that being able to see the giveaway sign. I think there's a boat that is blocking the view at the moment. But what's your experience been? I mean, do most people comply and slow down with the giveaway sign?
Yeah, it depends on the state of congestion around there. With congestion makes it very difficult and confusing. The intersection, as you know, is confusing at any point, at any time of the day because of its design and the giveaway signs off in different directions. But especially traffic coming past my place going downhill, heading south towards that giveaway sign at that intersection, it's terrible. And it's at least once a day we hear cars screeching brakes as they realise that it is a giveaway sign and they don't have natural giveaway, particularly with the tradie traffic, because they're not always, and somebody raised this point before, the tradie traffic is not local. You know, they might know what the rat run is, but they may not. They're heading from a different place each day, and their understanding of what the local rules are around there are not guaranteed. So especially with the speeds that they travel, in my experience travelling down that street, it's an accident waiting to happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
There's no further questions, so thank you very much for that and for assisting Mr. Levy with his question. Thank you. We'll go back to Emily Terracini. We saw you rejoin. So are you there, Emily? No, I think she might be having computer problems. She's on the phone. Yeah.
Are you able to hear me now, Ms.
Oh,
Madam
yes,
Chair?
there we are. We can. Thank you. Thank you.
My apologies. Technology is defeating me today, I think.
When you're ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the panel and other interested stakeholders. I reside at 65 Bannockburn Road with my husband and our baby. Our residence has an entrance diagonally opposite the DA site and another on Reservoir Road. I use the dogleg intersection near the DA site on a daily basis, both on foot, including with a pram. And
Emily, can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
Could you just slow down? You're just a bit hard to hear. It's a bit muffled. So maybe if you just slow down.
Sorry.
That's okay. We just want to hear what you're saying.
I use the dogleg intersection near the DA site on a daily basis, both on foot, including with a pram, and in a vehicle. This proposed development is completely inappropriate for the existing street configuration. The Bannockburn Road driveway of this development is proposed to serve 17 residences and feed directly into a dangerous and confusing dogleg intersection that is already strained with its current traffic load. There is no appropriate site distance for an access point here. This is an intersection that is already compromised by the road layout and gradient and has been the site of many collisions, as the panel has heard already. Not only is the configuration confusing from all entry points, motorists are often confused as to who is to give way, as the traffic flow is counterintuitive to the road layout, again, as the panel has heard. At the steep gradient, the resultant blind corners and spots, speeding vehicles, school drop-off and pick-up, uncontrolled crossings, and then the fact that the intersection is also used as a rat run, as just mentioned by my neighbour. It is deeply concerning that this site could be considered in any way appropriate for an 18-unit seniors development. This dangerous and confusing intersection is designed to serve semi-detached suburban housing, yet it currently services more traffic than its suburban layout is designed to cope with during school drop-off and pick-up times and as a rat run route. At a driveway serving 17 residences housing senior citizens and construction vehicles during the construction period, to an intersection already struggling to cope, and this is a recipe for disaster. The introduction of more vehicles into this intersection is simply inappropriate for this built environment. For pedestrians, there is no curb to mount the council strip and no footpath on either side of the intersection to traverse it. So those pedestrians with prams, such as myself, or those less mobile, are forced to walk on the road itself, often in the middle of the road, to avoid parked cars. One then needs to cross the intersection to reach the safety of the footpath on the opposite side of Bannockburn Road. Every school day, I witness parents and children crossing at uncontrolled spots, cars parking illegally in the intersection, reversing into the intersection and speeding through the intersection. I can only implore those involved in the decision-making process to witness the intersection during school drop-off and pick-up times to see for themselves the bedlam that it is. A significant increase in traffic cannot be safely accommodated in this intersection. Accidents during and after the construction period are entirely foreseeable. For the safety of road users, school children, and other members of our community, please reject this DA. Thank you very much for taking the time to consider my submission.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emily. Panel, do we have any questions for Emily? No, none. Thank you, Emily, for
thank you, Madam Chair.
Challenge. Was it tackling your IT? Just stay with us.
You.
Thank you.
Apologies.
John, yeah, it's okay. John Smith, are you there? We are. Thank you, John. When you're ready.
Yes. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the panel. I live at 11 Reedy Street. I'd like to refer you to the Construction Traffic Management Plan and to address the applicant's extensive use of vague and potentially misleading wording. The plan contains numerous phrases such as "it is anticipated that" and "it is proposed that," and appears to be more of a statement of vague intentions and, at most, reasonable endeavours, rather than a statement of best endeavours, firm commitment and accountability. Some examples are as follows. Section 3.2, duration and staging of work, states, "It is anticipated that during building construction works, the Bannockburn Road buildings will be constructed first," etc. Section 3.3, work hours, states that "it is proposed that standard construction work hours would be applied to the site." It's also of concern to note that the plan misstates the council's published regular building site hours to the benefit of the applicant. Also under 3.3 work hours, there's no commitment to specified truck movements during peak traffic times or peak school times. Merely the vague wording, "In order to minimise disturbance to the school pick-up and drop-off operations, truck movements will be limited between the school peak drop-off and pick-up periods." 3.6 construction work zone states, "It is proposed that loading and unloading of demolition, excavation and building materials will be undertaken from within the site." And the section also states, "No work zones on the site's frontage to Bobbenhead Road, Reedy Street or Bannockburn Road are proposed for the purpose of unloading or loading construction materials." 3.7, crane activity states, "It is anticipated that the crane would be operating within the site from the proposed crane location shown in the staging plan." And it also states, It is proposed that the crane and jib will be of a suitable size to enable the lift and swing parts of the crane to be clear of the retained trees. 3.9, construction worker parking states on-site car parking for workers would be provided to ensure nearby local roads are not impacted. And site access arrangement states once the basement car parking area has been constructed, it is proposed to utilise the basement for the parking construction worker vehicles and trade vans. But in 4.1, the plan includes a table showing anticipated average daily construction traffic movements, but because the applicant has classified them as private cars, the table excludes the numerous worker vehicles and other trade vehicles that will definitely impact local roads throughout the day. In closing, I'd like to ask firstly if the panel is satisfied that the extensive use of these vague statements is sufficient to constitute commitment and accountability on the part of the applicant. Secondly, to ask the panel to consider what provisions would be in place to monitor this accountability. And lastly, to ask the panel to consider whether there would be substantial penalties in place for non-compliance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Panel members, are there any questions? No, there's not. Just regarding the penalties, I'll just jump in there. I think there are heavy penalties that can be imposed on private constructors if they're not maintaining the road requirements, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's a regulatory requirement of police. So I think they've got, if anyone's breaking road rules or anything like that, that's just a normal road management. But that's not for today. I just thought I'd let you know that there is compliance around that by the normal road users compliance rules. Thank you, Smith. Thank you very much.
Chair, are the conditions of consent not the way that if an approval is given, conditions of consent make it very clear what the process is for construction, traffic and so on?
Great. Thank you, Ms. Malika.
It's not vague, not vague at all.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, could I ask if the commitments in the plan are pretty vague, then how can they be actually held accountable for those vague commitments?
That's something if they're vague, then that's something the panel, one of the things that we all have to look at here today is that construction plan. So we will take on board what you've said and see if we can satisfy ourselves if that's where we're going. But that will certainly be raised as and looked at by the panel as part of your submission.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Miss Patterson, Sophie Patterson.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you. When you're ready.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair and panel. My name is Sophie Patterson and I've lived for 4 years at 19 Crown Road, Pymble, just down the street from Pymble Public School, with my husband Michael and our 4 children who are 12, 10, 8 and 3. Like most other residents making submissions today, I'm not an expert. However, I feel I can offer a common sense perspective from people who actually live in the area, which will be impacted by this proposed. Firstly, I support entirely the view that the driveway onto the intersection of Bannockburn Road and Reilly Street is a danger to motorists and pedestrians, many of them very young pedestrians from Pymble Public School. I'll not go into this as many have before me, which is a major concern for me. From what I can understand of the developer's argument, which Council has apparently accepted, it is simply the least undesirable of the options available. There is argument about whether it is compliant with Australian standards on such matters, which I believe require a minimum sightline in both directions of 45 metres. If I can figure the report correctly, Council or the developer has said that for vehicles exiting the driveway, a sightline of 45 metres to the south, so looking right as you're leaving the property on to Bannockburn Road, can be achieved if all the trees to the south are kept trimmed. Join the meeting. In the 45 metres to the south of the driveway, there are 7 quite mature trees of 5 or 6 metres in height. I don't think they're heritage listed quality, but that doesn't matter to me. They form part of the makeup and character of that little stretch of Bannockburn. to talk about trimming them is questionable on 2 grounds. Who is going to enforce the council condition that they be kept trimmed to the exact need for visibility, the property owner or the developer? And more importantly, the reality is that you need to trim them right back to near nothing to achieve the desired result, so you might as well cut them down altogether. To me, this exemplifies what is wrong with the development proposal. If, even on a minor scale, the visual attractiveness of the area takes another blow in the interest of making a compromise to achieve alleged compliance on something which shouldn't be contemplated in the first place, in my opinion, the driveway onto the intersection. It's a danger to the community and to our young children. Thanks for your time.
Christine Chong.
Joined the meeting.
Thank you, Sophie.
No problem.
Questions, panel?
Thank you.
No, that's it. Thank you very much, Sophie, for your cutting that tree.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Watts. We got Stephen Watts. Is he? He was here.
Yep. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can. Thank you, Stephen.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for your time this afternoon. Much appreciated. I think at the start of the call there was some reference to the disability access reports, and there was just one bit of detail that I don't think that we covered. It talks about residents getting to the Boomerang Street bus stop via Reilly Street, and the distance walked would actually be an extra 100 metres than the 350 metres that was detailed in the report. So we just wanted to highlight that, just kind of really highlighting that it wouldn't be a compliant bus route or route to the public transport, and that certainly wouldn't be in the interest of the seniors or obviously the disabled. In regards to the complex, it really doesn't sort of complement the surrounding area in any way, and it's certainly not in keeping with the sort of direct area and the landscape. In particular, Block D, which has been highlighted a few times on this call, is a particular concern. I feel like the size of this project has been purely scaled for maximum commercial gain, and little, if any, attempt has been designed in sympathy and with character of the scale of the surrounding properties and landscape, and obviously in the needs of the community. We've talked a lot about the position of the driveway being dangerous and the poor visibility, so we don't need to go into that. We've talked about the confusing intersection and obviously the high chances of accidents. I would strongly encourage council and the panel to visit this site at key times and see it for yourselves. We've talked about pathways and sidewalks not being adequate already, so I won't go into that. But obviously this project will just make matters really simply more dangerous. The proposed plans would significantly reduce the level of privacy and enjoyment for many adjacent properties. In particular, Block D that we've talked about, it is overly bulky, it's extremely excessive in design, and the impact of surrounding properties. I'm based at 96 Bannockburn. We've heard from our neighbour 98 Bannockburn. Bearing in mind there's quite a steep gradient, and so this Block D, if it's 8 or 9 metres high, it feels more like 12 or 13 in a real experience because of the gradient of the hill, because it's at a higher position facing south, and there's lots of windows. There doesn't seem to be any privacy being taken into account. Another point around, there's a rich ecological flora and fauna contained within 98. 98 Bannockburn actually has several eucalyptus blue gum trees, and their root system will be impacted by this proposed development. They're actually part of the blue gum high forest ecological community, and these trees are protected. Their root systems can span 50 to 70 metres and will without doubt be impacted by this site next door. There's also many sort of vulnerable and endangered species that we've seen in this biodiversity area. We note that that was one of the reasons why this was rejected previously. And there's animals such as parrots, flying foxes, and yellow-bellied bats that we see frequenting that area. And again, just really highlighting our consternation that this has been refused before. A lot of money has been spent on fighting this, yet it seems to be back under consideration. And the reasons it was rejected was for biodiversity issues, inadequate setbacks, site boundaries, unacceptable impact on the landscape and character. It really does impact the design of the area and the impacts on trees in the direct vicinity. the proposal was not in the public interest. It wasn't in the public interest in 2018, and it's quite clearly not in the public interest in 2020. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Panel members, do we have any questions for Mr. Watts? No, none. Thank you. I did have one about the biodiversity, but I think I'm fine on that. Thank you. Thank you for speaking today, Mr. Watts. The next speaker, thank you. The next speaker we have is John Papangalis. Is John there?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello
John.
there.
Hello.
Hi there.
You're our last speaker.
Oh wow. Okay.
So you can wrap everyone up if you you can wrap it all up for us if you like. So when you're ready.
Okay. Yeah, we live at 67 Ku-ring-gai Street since 2002. We're located a few houses down from the intersection with our street and Coleman Road. So this intersection is directly opposite the driveway, which is at 83 Coleman Road. And there were two issues I wanted to talk about. And the first issue is all the traffic that the trucks are going to cause going into this driveway, and quite a lot of people have already spoken about that. So I don't really want to talk any more about that. My other concern is once the residents occupy all the blocks, the safety of the driveway for the residents who live in Block A. So Block A is the block that's nearest to Coleman Road, and the residents who live there will have to drive their car into the driveway and park in Block A. However, from what I can see on the plans and drawings, there appears to be no circle where the resident can turn their car around.
Christine,
so that they
join the meeting.
So that they can exit forward. That means the residents of Block A will have to reverse down the driveway and out onto Coleman Road. So this road is a major arterial road, and there are cars flying southbound down there all day long. So surely it has to be unacceptable for a senior or a person with a disability to have to reverse their car 30 metres down a driveway and onto a main arterial road. I would think this experience will be stressful for any driver. So, you know, for seniors to be asked to do this, I think it would be unacceptable to ask them this. Yeah, so that's really the only thing I had to talk about. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions on the matters raised by John? No, none. Great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for wrapping up our speakers against.
Okay, great. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, John. We'll now move into the speakers on behalf of the application. And I understand that Sue Francis, is Sue with us? And Zheng Ling, the project architect. I can see we've got Daniel Barber with us. Daniel, are you going to speak, Daniel Barber being the owner?
I have the, it's my name, but we have Sue Francis speaking here, and we have the consultant team in the room, or most of the consultant team.
Oh, that would explain why there's no other names up there, I can see. All right, well, would you like, Sue Francis, would you like to address?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a room of experts, but I will be the conductor for any of the issues that we've raised. I've been listening to all the submissions being made, and I've categorised them as that there is a key issue in relation to the traffic, parking, the construction management aspects of that. And I do have Jason Rudd here, who's our traffic expert, who I will hand over so he can respond to those particular issues. There are some other issues that have been raised, concerns about the Land and Environment Court, privacy in relation to Block D, some accessibility queries that I will address and potentially have some of the other experts address some of the key issues. But I thought perhaps the first thing would be to respond to the issues that have been raised, which has been preeminent in most people's submissions, which is the concerns as to construction management, parking and safety. And I thought I'd hand over to Jason for that, if that suits you.
That would be very helpful. Just before you did that, was there a submission you wanted to make, either yourself or Mr. Barber, on the project itself before we launch into responding to some of the issues that were raised by the speakers? I'm just wanting to make sure whether there was a 3-minute presentation you wanted to make first before you address.
I often find that presentations don't necessarily assist the panel, other than to say that we acknowledge that this was an application that was refused by the Land and Environment Court. And in preparing the application was very specifically designed and addressed and modified so that it addressed those particular concerns, particularly in terms of the size and scale of the house that fronts Bobbin Head Road, or the building, I should say, that fronts Bobbin Head Road, specifically designed so that it actually, for all intents and purposes, looks exactly like the house would be in that context, and in relation to some of the setbacks that are significantly greater than you would have as a house. But for all intents and purposes, it's a single, so it's a single story, 2-story, which is permissible, structure, and with a single access for a single vehicle. So for all intents and purposes, in a streetscape sense, that looks exactly like a house. The other issues were some of the setback concerns in relation to side boundaries. We will contend that the setbacks in this particular proposal far exceed the council's minimums and far exceed that proposed before. Interestingly, the biodiversity concerns, we don't have any encroachment into the biodiversity area. And interestingly, the existing house that sits on, what number is it? 102, already actually sits within the biodiversity zone itself and has a swimming pool in that area. We have nothing in that particular area. The issue of traffic has been the discussion with council to minimise any concerns for access and visibility, and that's what I think it's important that Jason raise in relation to what has been done. And so I won't step on his toes, although I could probably raise a few things, but I'll let him do that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you, Sue.
So I'll hand you over to Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, yes, name's Jason Rudd. I'm a director at Transport Planning Partnership and looking at for now on this matter. Just to put some things in context in terms of the traffic situation in regards to development, there's been a bit of talk about the parking and having 2 cars per dwelling and so forth. But in terms of the traffic generation of a senior living development such as this, when we use the RMS traffic generation rates, as we're required to do, we compare that for a seniors living against what would be for their standard dwellings, we're looking at a difference of about 3 additional car movements in the peak hour. And keeping in mind that as a seniors living development, they're not necessarily constrained by the employment and so forth, whereby they are arriving home in that 5 to 6 peak hour period, or even leaving the house to get to their jobs in the morning. they can actually determine when they want to leave the house to a certain degree by their daily lives, effectively. So they're not competing with the peak hour. So on a whole, we're talking about 3 extra vehicles per hour. In terms of the parking elements that were raised, the proposed development's providing 20 car parking spaces, which includes 2 visitor spaces. Now that 20 parking spaces is in excess of the set parking requirements by 2, and also 4 spaces over and above what the DCP would stipulate. So in terms of the parking, we're providing more parking than is required. And noting too that the parking, if you comply with the SEP, then it's not a grounds for refusal on parking grounds.
Yeah, can I just interrupt you on that point? There was a lot of submissions in which, you know, that's correct, that complies. But the difficulty that the neighbours have is that that may well be well and good in an area that's not sort of shared with a public school and with limited parking and big boats and everything else. So I suppose how do you overcome, or I mean, I suppose you don't have to, but what consideration, if any, did you give to the location of your development in an area that's already compromised or shared with other facilities such as a school?
Well, in terms of the on-street parking demand, keeping in mind that, I mean, we are over what's required. So there's visitor parking on site. The parking spaces themselves are on site within the basement, are accessible spaces. So they're overly wide and so forth. So there are opportunities to provide extra parking within the basement, should that not be required for accessible parking or disabled parking access. In terms of buying it, if it was to be assumed that there is no parking on street, then there's no parking for any residents anyway. So in terms of looking at this site to purchase units, there's enough parking to provide on site.
That's okay. I mean, I just wanted to know what consideration you gave to that in your design. That's I'm just was asking.
Nothing to accommodate it all on site in terms of the planning requirements, and over and above, particularly the visitor parking, which wasn't required on the set, which we view as an important part of the narrative for this region.
So that your two extra visitors parking was your response, basically. Is that what you?
Yeah, and that was developed with council in looking at how to respond to the submissions that were made through the design.
Can I just? We've got the panel who's probably got a number of questions, and it might be just easier rather than you just addressing everything, that we just ask questions of you. That's okay for us to do that? I think this might be easier for the panel if we could actually direct our questions or concerns arising from the assessment and the submissions today to you directly.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
I think that's the best way of going about it, because I think the traffic management of both pre and post construction is a live issue. So can I go to Ms. Malecki? Elaine, you have a number of questions you'd like to ask the traffic engineer of the applicant?
Just one raised by one of the last objectors, and that is, will the owner of the Bobbin Head Road unit be able to exit in a forward manner?
Yes, they will. Yes, there's enough room in there. There's a hard stand outside of the garage area to facilitate the forward in and forward out. It's a good point. That they will be able to do so, and also forward in, forward out at Bannockburn Road as well.
There looks to be enough room for 2 cars there. Am I right or not?
That's correct. Yes. Under the design is effectively as a double width space.
Yes.
Which allows, if you are disabled or have a wheelchair mount, to be able to use that space additionally on the side of the space to be able to use it. If you wanted to park a visitor in there, you could do so as well.
Another question was related to construction, and the need to have the people assisting the traffic beyond or at the traffic lights when cars are coming from Bobbin Head, I suppose, towards Pacific Highway because of the length of time it takes to get onto the site. How do you envisage that being managed?
Yeah, so in regards to the construction traffic management plan that's prepared, and in terms of its vagueness and what have you, it was never intended for this to be the absolute final construction traffic management plan. That has been set aside as a detailed construction traffic management plan to be prepared in accordance with the conditions of consent. And consent condition 9 details the requirements for that to be prepared. And once you've put the contractor on board, that's when you would do it. In terms of the traffic control for the queuing and so forth, it's a very large site, and it may go to some of the other questions as well, is that you can actually accommodate, with a large site, you can actually accommodate vehicles to circulate on the site. So come in, forward, circulate, queue, be loaded, and then go out, where you don't get that ability to do that on a single residential site. So in that regard, it's a better opportunity to do that. Yes, we will have to do or someone will have to do the construction traffic management plan, which will have the traffic control plans associated with it, which will have the details of where the stop-go controllers will need to be located, and that may well need to go back up the intersection.
And the final management plan will be specific, not vague.
Yes, it will need to be specific, and it will need to be developed in consultation with council.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I've got a question, Madam Chair.
Coleman?
Yes, Jim Coleman here. Just coming back to the traffic and road safety matters. In your statement of environmental effects on page 13, you made a brief reference to local schools, ovals and pools, swimming pools. I think that was about it, one sentence. But you're obviously aware of the enormous concern raised by locals, residents, parents of school children and so on. And I'm just wondering if did you go into any depth in trying to assess the relationship between the traffic that your site would be generating, small though it may be, on the daily comings and goings of school children and parents and carers in both directions, up and down the hill, and of course during times of day, regardless of weather, that traffic would be there, serving the school opening and closing times. Of course, during school term, it would be more intense. But my question is, coming back to the fact that you only made very brief reference to those local facilities, am I right in assuming that you didn't really see those as important in your traffic planning preparation?
Not necessarily not important. And in terms of the access location, which I think the question is referring to, whether it's one car or 3 cars, we're looking to make sure that the design is compliant and more importantly, it's safe and as can be given the site conditions that we've got. Now, the location of the access in terms of its proximity to the intersection we've got here, we're right out on it. It complies with the Australian standards in terms of location. The driveway location is not prohibited, as was it's referenced in that Australian standards. The site distances that are available are certainly going to be better than what they are now, that coming out of 100 and 102 Bannockburn. The nature of having that double width driveway allows us to get site displays to pedestrians along the footpath, and that footpath will be upgraded as part of the development along the site frontages. But what it also allows us to do is get compliant site distances in each of the directions. So there's enough site distance available for us to be able to see the approaching vehicles on all the approaches coming in and out of the intersection, which wouldn't be available to the same extent on Reilly Street. And under the RMS guidelines, we're looking to have the access via the Lower Orr Road, which would be the Bannockburn rather than the Bobbin Head Road access of the operations. So in that regard, that's what we focused on in terms of getting the access at that point. Keep in mind too that, I mean, as a seniors living, we're not necessarily looking to increase the traffic that will be coming in and out of that school peak. Residents would have some opportunities to avoid that, which existing residents may not have.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Levy?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions just related to the traffic. Firstly, with Building A, just following up on Elaine's question, if there were 2 cars parked in that garage, would both still be able to enter and leave in a forward direction?
Good question.
Yeah, you might need a couple of movements, but yes, you could get both cars out.
Okay, so on the couple of movements, if it's seniors development and disability, does it comply with the disability access compliance?
That's yeah. So if it's a disabled, there's only 1 space in that garage. Is that what you're trying to ask, or are you?
Well, yeah. If it's a disabled, you're saying yes. 2 cars can park there, and you can manoeuvre it to get in and out. Drive in and then manoeuvre it so you can then drive out, not reverse out. Are you allowing for the development of seniors as being a driver and also a disabled person?
Yes, it's designed as a single space in the garage, single accessible space within the garage.
Right.
So that will comply with the housing seniors living requirements in terms of its design.
So
it's not relying on 2 spaces to meet minimum standards.
No, it's not.
The one.
Okay.
Okay. And there's a question that came up about the pedestrian access from one side to the other. And look, this may be you or it may be the architect, but the pathway between Block A and Block B, what's its purpose? Is it intended for residents generally on the eastern side to access Bobbin Head Road, or is it solely for Block A to access Bannockburn Road?
It's for blocks B to E to access Bobbin Head Road. It's not a public accessible route, but it will take pedestrians from those western blocks eastern blocks out to Bobbin Head Road.
So do they need to walk beside the dwelling and then down the driveway?
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
It's a shared path that runs through there.
Okay, and on the other side, Bannockburn Road, there's a street tree proposed just north of the driveway, which looks like it may have potential to inhibit some of the sight distance up Reilly Street. Have you seen that?
Yep, I'm looking at the plan right now.
I'm just wondering if that's a prudent spot to be having a street tree in terms of sight distances, depending on what the tree is and its coverage.
Yeah, there's a council condition to remove that tree. Okay. So in the draft conditions, it said that tree would be removed from the proposed development.
Thanks. And the final question, just back to construction management, and certainly ahead of the basement being completed, about where people, or particularly, sort of tradespeople, are likely to park, and whether or not there would be pedestrian access from Bannockburn Road or Reilly Street to the site in terms of access by builders and the like, or would their access be solely from Bobbin Head Road?
Well, the intention would be to have on-site parking in those pre-basement stages. So some areas we could facilitate some on-site parking.
I'm just wondering about the likelihood of tradespeople needing to park in Reilly Street or Bannockburn Road.
Yeah, so in terms of the first stages before we get there, there isn't a lot of workers. As you'd appreciate, they come with the building stage. So initial stage is demo and excavation. There's very few sort of workers on site. And being such a large site, we can get them to park within the sites itself.
Would there be an issue with fully fencing Reilly Street and Bannockburn Road during the duration of construction? Or would that be practical?
I wouldn't say so. And in fact, we probably make sure that the site was securely fenced and hoarded to stop the general public coming into the site. So yes, wouldn't see a problem.
I'm thinking about in terms of discouraging workers, for example, from parking in Reilly Street and Bannockburn Road.
Agreed.
Yeah. Okay, that was all my questions on the traffic, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Was there anything you wanted to add to any of those questions from the applicants that we haven't, from the objectors that, Jason, that you wanted to sort of point out to us that maybe we haven't asked?
I don't think so. I think we've touched on the key points that I've been madly scribing as the objectors were speaking. So,
no, I've got a couple of questions, Madam Chair, but they were not raised by objectors.
Are they of the project traffic engineer?
No, they're not. They're on different issues.
Okay. Are they to put to the applicant on some other issue?
Yes, I've got one, two related questions on landscaping and general design.
Ms. Francis, who's going to address that?
Okay, I have Aaron Lakeman here who can look at talk on trees, and I have Sean the architect here who can look at any design issues.
Okay, so which
one? I can always jump in any panel.
Okay, so Mr. Coleman, do you want to go with your question?
Yes, I'm not worried about who might answer them, but the first one is to do with landscaping, and I guess it's a fairly minor matter. But on page 53 of the Statement of Environmental Effects, you say that the proposed landscaping is, and I quote, concentrated to the centre of the site. Now, when I look at the landscape plan, I can't see anything of the kind. There are buildings in the centre of the site, a few scattered shrubs, and a little bit of public open space. So what was the meaning of that statement?
Jim, Aaron Lakeman here. Might just talk, the landscaping, both soft and hard, is distributed throughout the whole site. That creates a range of communal spaces in the eastern side, but also in the centre of the site, at the rear of Block A, between the other blocks, to create more of a primary communal space. I think that's what that's referring to. It's more referring to a range of activities and landscape areas.
I see, even though when you use the term concentration, the plan itself doesn't present an image of a concentrated planting pattern, but rather a very limited scatter of small trees, shrubs, grassed areas and the like within the framework of the larger trees around the perimeter. So I hope I'm just reading this correctly.
Well, maybe we might scrub the word concentration. think of that central part of the site between the rear of Block A as being the primary deep soil area, communal open space area, and the opportunity there to establish large canopy trees as we are showing on the landscape plans. Okay?
Yeah, okay. Just another minor point, provision for dry weather pedestrian access between the various buildings. The pathway system seems to work quite well, but are you anticipating providing covered ways?
Sean from AJC here. The areas that are undercovered are between the blocks, between the blocks on Block C and B and C, and the path is an accessible path throughout the site. That's what we're anticipating.
Well, I'm still not quite sure whether in torrential rain, is it going to be safe on a site with a fair slope for people to navigate those pathways, presumably with some kind of shelter. That's not
for residents coming to their dwellings, they're mostly going to be coming from the parking. So you'll be undercovered.
Well, how do you know that? How do you know that they're not meeting each other somewhere on foot? Are you assuming that everybody's going to come up and down from the garage?
Well, that's the primary access way for residents anyway, that they come in through the car park and through the lifts and accessible path to their unit.
So the pedestrian paths we see on the plan they're not really amenities. They're just sort of functional routes for those persons who might occasionally toddle out on foot.
Well, it is an amenity to the communal spaces, to the landscape spaces. So it provides an accessible path to all those areas.
Jim, can I add on this as well? Aaron again.
Yeah,
from
sure.
So imagine you're living in blocks B, C, D, and you're walking up the Bannockburn Road. That accessible path is a series of ramps which are Australian standard compliant, both in ramp, gradient, and slip resistance and handrails. So there's certainly compliance and option for walking through those spaces. But the space in the middle there, that's a communal space, and we've actually got quite an amenable open turf area there with vegetable gardens, which provide opportunities for obviously socialisation and things like that. And we deliberately did not cover that path so that we could maintain the open air landscape amenity and maximise water infiltration, tree growth, etc., etc.
Okay. Another question on the what you might call it overall site amenity, and I quote again from the SEE, page 34, I think it is. When you say that the development contributes positively to the public domain by enhancing the natural visual character of the site. Now, where is the public domain here? We're talking about private space. Was that a misquote, or are you suggesting that there's something in the design which really is enhancing the public domain as viewed from the public streets?
Jim, it's Sue Francis here. It was in the context of the streets, not the context of the site as a whole. So in terms of Bobbin Head Road, we have a built form which is consistent with the characteristic built form that you'd anticipate to be a house. In that location, the setbacks are considerable, between 13 and 20 metres, and it's a single-storey structure consistent with what you would normally anticipate there. So in that context, it enhances the desired future character of that street. Likewise, in terms of Bannockburn, the built form is broken up so that as it presents to the street, it presents as the scale and form of dwelling house widths relative to what would be anticipated in the streetscape. So it's consistent with the desired future character in terms of the built form width, both on Bannockburn and Really, and on Bobbin Head. And if you look at the architectural plans, you'll see that the built forms are broken up in that context. I'll let the architect respond to any further issues on that.
Yeah, Jim, Sean from AJC here. The existing house towards Bobbin Head is actually set back much further and not in line with the existing predominant building line. So what we've done is we pushed the building forward so it's in line with the predominant building line, therefore continuing the streetscape. So that's one of the strategies we did to enhance that streetscape.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I just want to go back to a traffic matter. The traffic issue, Jason, I think it was. It's been brought to my attention that in the assessment report, it actually says, and I'm not sure, I can't find, it's not readily at my fingers, I'm sorry, I don't have a hard copy of the assessment report in front of me. It says that the Bobbin Head Road frontage would serve a single unit. Vehicles will be able to safely reverse down consistent with the existing arrangement. Is that correct? Because what you've just told us might be a bit inconsistent with that statement.
Yeah, no, it's certainly allowed for in terms of the design. I'm just trying to find it myself, but the design that we've got there certainly can accommodate the manoeuvre forward in, forward out.
So it can accommodate it, but is it compliant?
Yes, sorry, yes. So it can accommodate it in terms of compliance with standards, yes. There's an extra hard stand outside of the garage area.
And what's the standard we're looking at for that?
It's, well, the AS 2890.1.
What is it?
2890.1.
Okay, all right. I've got one last question, and it's not in traffic, but it's in relation to the oak tree. You would have heard there was concern about the 100-year-old oak tree and on the north side boundary, I think it is, and the root structure. What's and this is something I'll put to the staff as well, but what protection or assurances can we get that that root structure of that tree won't be compromised during construction?
Aaron from Taylor Brummer here. I'll speak to that. So there's a couple of points to make here. So the proposed building comes into the tree protection zone within an acceptable range. It's at 14%, which has been endorsed by the arborist. So in relation to the construction management plan, the truck entry in and out is actually outside that zone. And then in terms of the construction of the building and also, I guess, ongoing considerations, it's in the draft conditions of consent. There's a range of management and procedures that are required to be adhered by, and the arborist is also required to be on site during certain activities. And also, in support of that, the arboricultural impact assessment supplied as part of the development application outlined a range of activities, again, which have been supported by the conditions of consent to ensure that that is protected and enhanced, that tree. And that's all in accordance with the Australian standard.
I have a design question, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Levy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if somebody could provide a bit of a better explanation around the privacy treatments for the first level units, particularly the northern side of Block B and Block C. What I can see from the northern elevation is, and particularly for unit 1.01, is along the balcony areas there seems to be a balustrade with a seemingly transparent fencing located above it. And that's on either side of, there's a forward area of the living room that has some vertical slats which seem to be there, but to direct views pretty well straight ahead, which is just slightly offset from the pool on the other side. So if I could just get a little bit more explanation about what that privacy fencing is to either side, and then I wouldn't mind just testing whether or not there are some alternative treatments for that and the northern side of Block C, and also potentially the east and west of Block D that might perhaps minimise some of those privacy impacts.
Michael Sean from AJC here. The northern balcony for Unit 101, we have vertical privacy screen going all the way from ground to soffit level. We might even look at angling some of this vertical screening to provide more privacy, but that's definitely something to look at. The east and west balcony to that unit itself has a vertical screening above the planter, which goes up all the way to 1.8 metre above the finished floor level. So we felt that was adequate in dealing with the privacy issue. And also for the balcony to Unit 102, similar treatment with the vertical privacy screen.
Is it visually transparent, the fencing to the balconies? It's a little bit hard to tell from the elevation just how much viewing there will be through that privacy fencing.
Well, they are meant to be privacy screened. So during detailed design, we will design them in such a way that they are providing privacy, even though the elevation you see that it's transparent, but they are privacy screened, so they'll be designed as so.
I'm just wondering, given that privacy is one of the big concerns of the neighbours, just how, particularly if the panel's looking to support this, how we could have, I guess, full confidence that privacy would be ensured. Perhaps, without sort of dictating what it is, but I'd certainly feel more comfortable if I knew that there was some guarantee around that privacy, rather than just it's a detail to be looked at, at the design stage.
Yeah, on our DA drawings, DA 3404, we've actually tried really hard to address those privacy issues that the number 4 Greeley Street had, and we've actually looked at those vertical screening, a lot of options for them, and that's the option we came up with. And there will be fixed louvers, and they will be fixed at certain angles to provide privacy, definitely. So there wouldn't be operable louvers. So they'll be fixed at an angle that provides privacy to number 4, really.
So if we were to look, for example, at the vertical louvers on the northern living room area of Unit 101, how would they be fixed in terms of if they're oriented to the northwest, it's potentially overlooking the pool. If they're to the northeast, potentially sort of conflict with windows of the house. I'm just wondering whether or not that vertical treatment may be the best solution there, or potentially a horizontal treatment, or even something that was to an eye height and perhaps non-transparent, but allowed for some opening on top. Just whether or not there might be an alternative solution which might guarantee that privacy without overly compromising the access to light for that unit.
I believe that unit will receive plenty of daylight. We could definitely angle those vertical screen elements to the northeast, therefore pretty much obstructing all views to the existing pool in number 4. Really, that's an option we can look at. It's just a matter of getting the angles of the vertical screening correct, and they're definitely not transparent. They will provide privacy screening to number 4.
Ms. Levy, Stu Francis here. Certainly the applicant will be pleased to, or be happy, not pleased, happy to have a condition that ensures that the angle of those louvers such that any view, for example, to the pool would not be possible from that balcony.
Okay, and
that could be fine.
Equally, if there was a requirement around the fencing being non-transparent, would that be acceptable as well?
Absolutely.
That's all, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, I've got one more, a quick one, I hope.
Yep.
We've had comment about the retaining wall behind Block D, next to 98 Bannockburn. Is there going to be any work done on this? Because we've had comment that it's not particularly stable or safe.
Thank you. Ms. Francis, is there someone there to respond?
Look, I perhaps it'd be better if Aaron answered this one, but I can try. And that I understand that there has been some damage currently caused by a tree coming down, probably in the mini cyclone that happened in November, all those years ago when we thought that was the only trouble we were going to have in 2021. And the applicant proponent has already agreed that that will be replaced, repaired, rebuilt. At the moment, I understand it's fenced, and there's temporary fencing around that retaining wall because so that it's safety for the neighbours, the current neighbours' children, etc. But it's the intention to rebuild that when the construction starts.
So that'll be repaired during the construction.
Correct.
As far as I know, it's not on any of your plans. They say that retaining wall is to be retained.
The applicant's required to do that under the joining boundaries legislation in any event, and we'll do so.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Nothing further from anyone?
Nothing from me.
Fantastic. Well, I see there's still a number of the public online. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for their attention, the community's attention to this development. It's very helpful, challenging but helpful when you can get across the key issues that a development such as this, the impacts it will have on the community at large. So thank you for bringing them to our attention. Thank you to the applicant for having your staff on board to direct any questions that we had, both raised through the submissions today and that we had from assessing and looking at it, the panel looking at it ourselves. So,
Madam Chair, there is just one thing I just want to finish off on, because it is something that's happened between now and the staff writing their report that you're probably aware of, is the new draft diversity set that has been put out for comment by the Department of Planning in relation to a whole range of new housing. It is something that, strictly speaking, the panel needs to turn its mind to because it is a matter for consideration. But what I would say is, having looked at the document, it doesn't prevent this particular form of accommodation, and for all intents and purposes, there is nothing that would preclude this development from going ahead. But what I would say to the panel is that in its current form, literally only having come out for consideration on exhibition last week, that it is not imminent or certain. It is not a legally drafted document at present, and that its provisions are not clear or certain in any form. So it's not a matter that you should be concerned about, but I think it's a matter that you should just be mindful of and turn your minds to in any determination.
Thank you for that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention and reminding us. Good-o. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone again for bearing with us today and for everyone's well-behaved manner. It was much appreciated. So thank you. I'd now like to close the meeting, and that we're going to retire, the panel now retired, to deliberate on this item, and I'm sure that will take some time. The decision will be posted on Council's website within 48 hours from about 3:30 today. So within 48 hours, you should see it up on the website. So thank you again, and have a lovely and safe afternoon.
Thank you very much.
The